Hello. So I asked the lovely people who subscribe to my newsletter for questions around personal finance, property, budgeting, saving, basically anything to do with personal finance. And we got hundreds of replies, and today we're going to run through a load of them. We made a video like this in the past and people really enjoyed it, so I thought we'd do it again. Just a couple of bits of housekeeping before we get straight into this. A lot of people submitted questions but asked to remain anonymous, so we've changed the names. See if you can spot which ones they are. And secondly, last time I did this, I was scrunching up the paper and then I was throwing it into a bin, Kobe, and people were like, we want a bin cam so that we know that you're actually getting it in the bin because, I was claiming that everything was nothing but net. So I got two bin cams. Hello and hello. The first one missed, as you can see. And let's raise the stakes here a little bit. I was going to do a thing to show the benefits of compounding where I said, every single one I miss, let's start at a penny and double it every time. But there's about 100 questions here and I realised that I don't have 18 octillion pounds. So, I'd love to do that, but it could get real hairy real quick. So let's just say for every single one that I miss, we'll donate £2 to the local food bank round the corner from me. So hopefully I miss them all. I also want to let you know before we get started that anything we discuss today shouldn't be taken as financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor, and even if I was, I wouldn't be able to give you financial advice because I don't know anything about your specific circumstances. If you're looking for tailored specific advice, go seek out the help of a licensed professional. And when investing, please understand that your capital is at risk and that the value of your investments can go down. Let's begin. This first question is from Jim. Due to specific tax-related circumstances, investing in any kind of index or mutual fund is not an option for me. If you're in this position, would you consider investing in a manual index through direct stock purchases a viable option? For example, from the FTSE 100, pick 10 companies from different industries and buy shares proportional to market cap. Clearly, this has diversification issues, but not sure on a better alternative. Okay, Jim, great question to get started. £2 to the food bank. It's like a metre away from me. It's shocking that I just missed that. So, first of all, let's talk about diversification. In 1970, Fisher and Laurie released this paper. It's now behind a paywall on JSTOR, nothing like taking the greatest ideas in the world and hiding them from the general public. But anyway, they put forward this idea that you could pick 30 stocks randomly, and that would give you most of the diversification of just buying the whole index itself. They were looking at specific markets. So, you could just go to the S&P 500, pick a random 30 companies, and that would be enough. But recently, this has kind of been debunked. So Sears and Price showed that even 60 doesn't get you there. And the key thing, again, is they're looking at very specific markets. What you said there was 10 companies within the FTSE 100. The FTSE 100 is the top 100 companies in the UK. The UK market makes up about 4% of the global stock market, and you're picking 10 businesses, so 10% of the top 100. You're going very specific in a very specific market. I don't think personally that's enough diversification, but you alluded to that point. I just know people will say, you could have 7 stocks and capture the diversification of the market. I don't think that that's the case. I do think, though, there are some solutions here for you. One that springs to mind for me, you could replicate an index using something like a pie feature on Trading 212. They allow you to buy individual companies, have a pie, and then you can set the allocations and almost build your own index if you wish. This is going to take a bit of work, though, because you would need to rebalance it every year, but I think you're kind of prepared for that work if you can't actually buy index funds yourself. I've left a link in the description to that service if you want to sign up. If you use my link, you get a free share worth up to £100. That is an affiliate link, so I get something as well for that. And I've also put a video there on that I put together on how to set up those pies and stuff. But anyway, yeah, I hope that helps and good luck. Next question. Ben, due to the overvalued market, are there any proven methods to diversify? Ben, the first question is, missed. The first question is the market overvalued? We can all sit here and point to specific metrics that look like it is overvalued. And by every measure, especially the American stock market, PE ratios and things like this, the American market is overvalued, but it just finds a way to trundle on. I have an issue with me sitting here going, yes, the stock market is overvalued, because it makes people think, well, I shouldn't buy it then. And what I've seen over the last 10, 15 years that I've invested is plenty of people sit there at all times going, the market's overvalued. They sit out and they lose, they miss out on the returns that the market offers. So I tend to not sit here and think the market is 100% overvalued and I should do something as a result of that. But that's just me personally. Let's say you're approaching this and you're nearing to retirement and you're thinking, well, I don't want to see a dip in the value of my portfolio. Or you're the kind of individual who thinks short-term drops in the market are going to make me feel bad about investing, so I want to protect against that. You can add diversification of different asset classes into the mix. Commodities, like gold and things like this as well, bonds, maybe even a bit of cryptocurrency, or the jury's out on if that is a good diversifier or not. The jury's out on if any of them are good diversifiers. I could take you through points in history and show you how all of the things that I've just discussed there, basically at one point or another, this diversification benefit broke. We saw bonds pretty recently, the Liz Truss kind of mini budget, people with a 60-40 portfolio, which is a traditional diversified portfolio that's meant to kind of protect people, just fell apart. They were hurting bad because of the bond kind of crisis. So you ask, is there a proven way? I'm unsure if there's like a rock solid way of going, I get all of the benefits of the market with a perfect diversification. There's always a trade-off. And if you're diversifying away from equities, I'd expect that your long-term expected returns will be lower as a result. That's the kind of trade-off you make. Okay, Robert, I don't think I even answered your question there, but that's what you're getting. Robert, what do you think is more important for a person 25 and under to put their money into, a pension or investments? Okay, Robert, got that one in. So, first of all, your pension is being invested. And I think it's really important that you understand that, so that you log on, you see where your money's going, and you see, is my money being invested well? Your pension is being invested. You are investing. So really internalize that and go away and check and see what you're doing, see what it's doing. Okay, the next question though is, where's it more important? And let's answer this from the perspective of, should you put more money into your pension or should you be focusing on other areas? Traditionally, the best option for most people is going to be a pension. The numbers on paper will lead you towards a pension most of the time. But at your young age, you might have other goals in mind. You might want to buy a house. You might want more flexibility over your savings. So investing inside of a stocks and shares ISA can give you that flexibility. I think in the main, if you're investing through a pension and building a stocks and shares ISA, you're going to be doing okay, mate. So, try not to sweat too much over which one should I choose. The pension is always going to be the best long-term retirement saving vehicle, but it might not be suited to other more short-term goals. So I tend to think of my investments in terms of time frames, not what's the best, on paper thing. If I need money in 10 to 15 years, sticking it in my pension it doesn't make sense. I hope that helps. Simon, how important is it which currency you're investing in? Is there value in investing in close to home to avoid currency risk? Are currency hedge ETFs worth the extra cost? Got that in. So this is just my personal opinion. I try to remove currency conversion risk and all of that away from my decision-making process because I just think it's an added layer of complexity and kind of head scratching. I buy, in the main, index funds and ETFs that are listed in pounds because I don't want to pay a currency conversion fee. I am still paying currency conversion fees behind the scenes. It's just my view is that the fund provider will get a better rate than me because of the economies of scale that they get. Vanguard are going to get, currency conversion cheaper than I will. When I buy my global index, that money's then spread around thousands of businesses operating in different markets. They're from different countries, and then they sell goods and services to different countries. So there's just layers and layers of currency conversion happening all over the place. If I buy Apple stock, the performance of them, because a large portion of their business operates outside of USA, they have currency conversion risk themselves. If the dollar strengthens or weakens versus other currencies, that can impact their kind of bottom line. So I have exposure to currency risk throughout my portfolio through the process of buying businesses all over the world. I just tend to think it probably comes out in the wash long term. It's not something that I'm going to try and work against. And while some people might like hedged ETFs, I personally don't use them because I just think, how can I hedge against the fact that Apple sells products and services in hundreds of different markets and has exposure to currency all over the place? But yeah, just my 2p. I just like to be really simple, and I don't want to add more decision, more complexity to the portfolio. Jess, I need some lip balm. My lips are really dry. I went to a boxing event last night and I drank about 8-9 beers and dry lips. Jess, is choosing a fund the same as choosing a pie? I was all set to invest the full 20k allowance into a fund, but then saw pies mentioned on one of your videos, and now confused if they're the same thing or if you'd even recommend them. Okay, so you're talking, I missed it. God damn, how did I miss that? So, you're talking about trading 2-on-2 pies. They're not the same. A fund is like an investment. A pie is a feature on the trading 2-on-2 platform that allows you to group investments together. You could put in your pie a collection of funds and individual companies. It's just a way for someone to kind of build their own investments and automate the process. They're not the same, but many people use a pie to build almost like a fund of their own, if that makes sense. But yeah, one is, a type of investment, a fund, a collection of money that aims to invest in a specific market or in a specific way. The other is just a feature within a broker in the UK. Aaron, should I invest a lump sum knowing I might not be in a dip, or should I pay in monthly to try and get the average? I think that, the question there is clearly, should I slam all my money in at once? Or should I drip feed into the market? Here's a question as old as time. So I recently interviewed a financial advisor called Lisa Conway Hughes, and I asked her, so the whole point was we were looking at what to do with the lump sum. And I said to her, if a client's got 5 million quid who just won the lottery, what are you doing? She's like, I'm prompting them to just slam that into the market all at once, especially if it's a long timeline. If it's a shorter timeline, we approach it differently. So again, think about your investments in terms of time. Do you need the money soon, or are you tucking it away for 30, 40 years, whatever? If it's a long time horizon, we know that long term the market tends to trundle upwards. So it makes sense to get your money into the market as soon as possible. Now, that's the kind of sensible answer, right? But there's an emotional point here that I think we need to address. For many people, if they stuck 50 grand into the market and the next day it dropped, that would really impact their kind of mental state. And I think it's okay for you to say, that would bother me. So instead, I'm just going to chunk it up and spread it over, a few months. I think the key thing is to not take ages to do it. Don't do it over 2 to 3 years, maybe 6 months max, get it into the market that way. Callum, I'm 25 and I have £500 per month that I can put away. How should that be split across a cash ISA, stocks and shares ISA and pension? And how does this change as I approach retirement age? So again, think about your accounts in terms of timelines and when you might need the money, not, percentage allocations and what makes the most sense. Retirement savings, pension. Stocks and shares ISA, more flexibility. Cash savings, emergency fund. So at your age, maybe you're thinking, well, I don't have an emergency fund. So the focus there is initially to get to the 3 months worth of living costs. And then I can stop saving the cash amount so that I can then go and focus on investments more. So try and think of it from that perspective rather than what is the correct percentages. As you get older, this changes and it's very individual, this. So I'll give you an example. Someone working in the NHS might have a really generous pension, but the age at which they access that pension might move away from them slightly. So it's older than they would like it to be. So them as an individual might go, okay, well, I'm going to commit to saving inside of a stocks and shares ISA so that I can build up a pot of cash that I can access to bridge the gap between when I want to retire and when I can access my pension. It's highly individual, this. But I think, as long as you're asking yourself these questions continuously throughout your life, you're not going to go too far wrong. What I would say is don't carry too much cash. Cash is great for emergencies and, for short-term savings, but you don't want hundreds of thousands of pounds in cash, maybe not until you're retired anyway. But, as you're trying to build your wealth, you want risk on assets like stocks and shares and things like this. And just understand that, any money in your pension, you can't get at it for decades at your age. So if you want flexibility over time and stuff, the stocks and shares ISA is the way. I can't give you a definite answer. I hope you understand. But yeah, that's how I think about it. But yeah. Cameron, in the UK, the markets are obviously open at different times to the actual S&P 500. Is there any way to time purchases of the tracker to benefit on news, different market opening hours, etc.? Oh, missed. So this sounds like trading to me, mate, which, is a risky game. And I doubt that long term, if you're buying an index fund tracker, that you're going to be able to do anything meaningful in terms of purchases that's really going to drive significantly better returns. But you can do different order types, market, limit, stop. I'll leave a video below that goes into the different order types and when you would use them. Maybe you want to look at that if this is something that you really want to do. Okay. Christos, I got 56% of my money invested and have a savings account with around 12 months worth of living expenses in it. My long-term ambition is to buy a cash-flowing business, operate it for a while, and then hire another operator. What's the best vehicle that will help me accumulate my wealth to be able to use it in a few years' time for this massive purchase? And what percentage of my total or liquid net worth would be a reasonable amount to risk on such an endeavour? I don't want to be stupid about this. Okay, wow. Big question. First of all, for a purchase in a couple of years where you're going to need a cash balance, let's say I was buying a house, I wouldn't be putting that money into the stock market. I would just be looking to generate the best return possible on the cash through a savings account, maybe a money market fund, these kind of safer things. It's very tempting to slap it in the market, but if you're needing it in a couple of years, you should probably not be investing in stocks or equities. The bigger point that I want to focus on there is this whole how much money and all of this stuff. My question to you is how well will you know the business that you're buying? Because when you have a lot of knowledge in something, that reduces the risk. So for example, I bought the podcast off the production team that previously owned it. And for me, that didn't feel risky at all, even though it costs like a house. But to someone who has no experience in podcasting, it's a really risky thing to do, right? So I just want to ask you, what kind of business are you looking to buy? Do you have any experience in running that business? And then how are you going to pick an operator that you can trust to run the business as well? I think I see people online talking all the time of going, just go out and buy a business. And I think, why is the person selling you the business in the first place? And what do you know about running that business so that you can buy it off an individual who's likely run it for years, take it over and improve it? Running a business is hard, and running a business that you have absolutely no experience in is even harder. And then it's going to be really hard to find an operator that you can just plug into that business at the end of the day runs it well and you're still left with profit. Good operators cost a lot of money. So yeah, how much should you risk? I don't know, mate. What I would say to you is how big is the risk? Have you got experience? Do you know what you're doing? But yeah, tread carefully, mate, just so you don't, blow up all your finances. Andreas, I would love to hear some detailed views from you on the innovative finance ISAs. I think you don't usually go into detail about them in your videos and generally don't like them very much. So it's not that I don't like them. The innovative finance ISA was introduced post the financial crisis because of the rise in peer-to-peer lending. Basically, the banks stopped lending to everyone and this peer-to-peer lending market emerged. I had one of these in the past, but I got burnt by a company, I think they were called Funding Secure, basically offered really high rates of return on loans, took things like art as collateral, but then people just weren't paying back the loans, and the things that they were taking as collateral, they were overstating the value. It was a spectacular collapse. For me personally, I don't use one. Not many people do. They're really not that popular at all. And this peer-to-peer lending point, I'm sure people do it really well, but it just doesn't fit into my kind of broad investment approach. I get equities and, I can invest in my pension or I use cash and cash-like instruments. The peer-to-peer lending stuff, to me, it's just not something that I look at. So correct me if I'm wrong, but many people might be like, well, I generate 10% and it's rock solid and all of this, who knows? But yeah, I got burnt in the past. They're not a very popular product. They're not something that I use because I want to protect my ISA allowance for equities, for stocks and shares, because I think they've got a longer proven track record of delivering inflation-beating returns. Right, Kieran. How is the inflation-adjusted figure calculated on your calculator? I was hoping someone would ask about the calculator because we've made a compound interest calculator. It's completely free to access, and I'll link it below. I'll show you it on screen in a second. But one of my key issues with one of the ones online already were they were focused at saver. They were aimed at savers, and they always pre-populated dollars. I was like, give me a UK one, please. You can put dollars on ours if you want. But we focused it on investors. And what I mean by that is if you click advanced here, you can add in some great features like fees, including fee caps, inflation. You get this really nice chart view. And if you click on info, you get information of the impact of the fees and such. I'll leave it below, like I said, and I hope you like it. But in terms of the inflation adjustment, here's the formula that we use on screen. So let's just plug in a couple of examples here. So if you end up with a pot of £500,000 and inflation was 3% over 20 years, that's what the calculation would look like. And it would spit out an answer like this. So in real terms, our calculator would say that the £500,000 balance in real terms, inflation adjusted, has this purchasing power right here. Okay, next question is from Lisa. Is it bad that I don't want to take too much risk? I know you like a fund for some risky investments, and most financial YouTubers I've seen mention something similar. Okay. It's not bad at all. I think it's really good, first of all, that you're asking yourself about risk. I don't think many people do. And what you've identified is, your tolerance to risk. People always say, work out your tolerance to risk, and I don't think many people actually do. And risk tolerance as well is, it's depending on where you're at in life and how much money you've got. If you gave me £100 million tomorrow, am I going to want to take much risk with that? I'm pretty much done, right? From a financial perspective. So I might be like, well, as long as I generate a return that's 1% above inflation, I'm not really bothered. So, it depends on where you're at in life, and it also depends on your own kind of psychology of how you can handle seeing downturns in the value of the money that you have. I'm 100% equities, which is considered relatively high risk, because I want to produce the most amount of return that I possibly can while I'm young. When I'm 50 or 60, I'm sure that will change. I think what you need to talk about with risk is there's two types of risk really in my opinion. There's the risk of volatility, so the risk that the value of your investments falls in the short term. So this is, stock market crash kind of stuff. And for many people, the question there is, could I handle waking up one day and seeing the value of my portfolio collapse 30%? If the answer is no, you need to address that, right? You need to work out, well, how do I reduce that risk? But the second risk is that you get to retirement and you don't have enough money. And these two play off each other because typically, if you reduce the risk of volatility within your portfolio through, diluting down away from equities, you tend to reduce the expected long-term return. So there's a trade-off between these two things. Risk and reward is kind of like the trade-off. But if you're sat there going, I'm pretty confident that with less risk, I can still hit my goal. I'm not risking the fact that I'm going to end up with not enough money in retirement. Well, that's perfect. Everyone should have that conversation with themselves. I don't think it's bad at all. There's a guy called Guy here. Is there any merit to having investments split across more than one platform? So Guy, I have it on multiple platforms because it's my job to, financial YouTuber or whatever. So I use loads of different platforms, but not everyone needs to do that. What I would say the benefits are, first of all, the financial services compensation scheme covers up to £85,000 with different platforms. I think the risk here is overstated. I think the real protection that people have are what are called the CAS rules, which make brokers segregate client funds away from their own. So if the broker collapses, the funds are still sat there. So if a broker goes bankrupt, say, and they disappear, what should be left is bank accounts or accounts that hold all of our investments, and then they distribute them out. I think that's a bigger protection than the Financial Services Compensation Scheme. If you look for examples of brokers that have gone bust and, had to, the FSCS have had to step in, there's very few, and they tend to be quite small niche brokers. There's never been like a big, massive broker, like a Vanguard, say. So yeah, that exists, and there's a peace of mind there that comes from you spreading your money around different brokers, which, I can understand. But I think the bigger benefit for me is this idea that as an individual, I am pretty weak at times, and my idle hands like to play with my investments. So I split out the different types of investing that I do. So 90% of what I do is held in brokerage accounts where I basically don't log on very much. And then I have this 10% allocation where I like to try and beat the market, buy individual stocks, whatever. And that's really like kind of fun money. And what that allows me to do then is separate the two pots, because even though the 10% allocation that I have for some mental reason is performing better than the 90%, I know that the 90% tucked away that I don't really touch is what's going to fund my retirement. Worst case scenario, I know I'll be okay with that. So I think the benefit here is, keeping your idle hands busy, if you will. That's the way I look at it anyway. Michael, is it possible to transfer money out of a general investment account into an ISA without having to pay tax on any gains? If you have a capital gain that you crystallise or lock in that's above £3,000, I believe, well, you potentially owe tax. There's this thing called bed and ISA, which is where you sell under that limit every year and then you transfer that money in. So let's say you could go, okay, well, I've made £30,000 in capital gains here. I get the allowance, and every year I sell a bit of it and move it over so I can kind of benefit from the allowance each year. Also, there are allowances that exist for partners and stuff. So if you've got a partner, maybe you could use their allowance or transfer some of the investments to them so you can benefit there. But there's no real way to just be like, let's lock in 200 grand's worth of gains in a year and move it into a tax efficient account. Obviously, you've got the ISA limits as well. But yeah, bed and ISA is probably what you would look at and see if that helps you at all. Adrian, can you explain real versus nominal returns? Yes, I can. I can get that in there as well. So it's really important to look at real and nominal returns. And I'm going to give you a rubbish example that I used recently so that my editor can reuse the animation because I was proud of it. Let's say that this tyre represents your investments. And each year you're pumping up the tyre, but the tyre's got a continuous hole in it that leaks air out. In a year, you pump up the tyre by 10%. Now you could sit here and go, I have pumped that tyre 10%, it's gone up 10%, it's 10% more full than it was at the start of the year. But that's not the case, is it? Because of the hole. The hole represents inflation. And let's say that leak is 3%. So even though you've put 10% into the tyre, 3% has escaped out. So in real terms, the tyre has gone up by 7%. So this is the nominal increase is the 10%, the on paper increase or the amount that it's risen by. The real is after we adjust for the impact of inflation. And it's really important that we do that because otherwise our spending power and what that's forecast to be in the future doesn't account for that inflation impact. And what you'll get is people go, well, the stock market does an average rate of return of 10% a year, and I've crunched the numbers, and in 30 years, I'll have £1 million and that'll be enough. But the chances are it won't be because of the air that's been escaping out of the investments over time. So, real is after you've adjusted for the impact of inflation. And what we know about inflation is it's a persistent force that isn't going anywhere. I like this chart. Well, like is a weird word. I think it's a pretty depressing chart, but it shows the destruction of the purchasing power of £1 since 1200 to today. So £1 back then would get you what £2,000 gets you today. So you can see how persistent this inflation effect is. Joe. So Joe's asked, what do you think about investing in collectibles, sport memorabilia, artwork, cars, trading cards, etc.? I need to start missing some of these because I can't go around to the food bank and be like, here's £4. What do I think about them? Well, what I think about them is if you know a lot about them, then you can make a lot of money in them. I've answered this one before and I'll say it the same way. I always get people going, oh, did you know that Lego is the best asset class on the planet? But, what do you know about Lego? Like, there's certain sets that go up in value ridiculously. And then lo and behold, I'm sat here with loads of worthless bricks in my house because I know nothing about it. If you know lots about a particular hobby and collectible, you could potentially make money in it. The people who make money in whiskey, in art, in cars, in Lego, in whatever, are the people who know about those things. If you're just buying them because you think that they might produce you a return, don't do that. Just don't do that. The mad thing is as well about hobbies, right? Kind of like Rolexes. I see people going, oh, I bought a Rolex, it's a great investment. You're never going to sell it. You're never going to sell it. Like the amount of people that probably got these like Lego sets sat at home, they're like, oh, it's worth X amount, but they're never going to sell it. It's not an income producing asset because they've got too much of an emotional attachment to it. So yeah, I think like collectibles are good for collectors who really know the arena that they're operating in. For me personally, nah. I collect equities for a global index fund. Rares, that's a cool name, RARES, which kind of is funny coming off the back of collectibles. In the context of investing in global index funds, how can we protect ourselves against large drops? Think of the drops of 2008 and 2022. Oh, I missed it, yay. Okay, great question. So let's talk about protection from drops in terms of diversification. You could buy an individual company and have all of your money in that company, and then you're exposed to that individual company 100%. The risk there is that company goes bankrupt. You could then expand that out and go, rather than being an individual company and all that risk, let's buy a sector. So you buy, a few tech businesses. The issue there is what happens if that sector underperforms or has an issue. Okay, so you might then go multiple sectors, or you might buy all of a country, and then you can expand out and buy the whole globe. There's like layers of diversification and this ability to, dilute down the risk of being exposed to just one particular thing in one particular market, say. Once you buy the whole global market though, or as close to it as you can replicate through, say, a global index fund, where do you go from there? Beyond that is diversification into, say, other asset classes. And this could be bonds, this could be, like gold or whatever your thing is. But typically that type of diversification where you dilute down the equity position can lead to lower expected returns. There are some cases where some people will point out portfolios where they go, well, this kind of portfolio is structured in this way over this time frame, whatever. But generally, once you go beyond global equities and you start adding in other things, you're dialing down the equity position and you're dialing down the expected return long term. So once you buy the whole globe, you've got the whole thing. And if there is a global, crisis like a pandemic that hits the market, you're not going to be able to avoid that. So there's no magic way to say, I want all of the benefit of global equities, but I don't want the negative, the downturn. And that's kind of the squeeze to the juice. The juice is the average returns of about 5% above inflation over the last 100 years. That's the good point. The bad point is that every so often the market has these meltdowns. The way I try and see it is, sorry, croaky voice. The way I try and see it is, maybe I sound better like this, kind of like Phoebe in Friends when she was singing with her husky voice, smelly cat. The way I try and see this is that they're a feature, not a bug, that they're part of the ride, and that when they come along, actually, this is just kind of like a normal market function. I know it doesn't feel very normal that we're going into a global pandemic and all of these things, but if we look throughout history, the history of equity investing anyway, there's been these events every, few years, 10 years, whatever, that rock the markets, and they always seem to just come back long term. And if there was ever a time that they didn't come back, well, we would kind of have bigger issues anyway, wouldn't we? So, the reason I could sit here and say, add bonds to the mix or whatever to dilute down your equity position to reduce the volatility within your portfolio, but you're still not going to avoid the event. If you had 50% equities, 50% bonds, and the global stock market drops by, 20%, well, then your portfolio is likely going to dip by, say, 10%. You're still going to feel it, and it's still probably going to worry you in that moment. I think the better exercise here is to really wrap your head around the fact that these events, these big drops in equity prices, are normal. It's more normal for equity prices to go up long term, but it's normal for them to have these issues every so often where you might see 20, 30% falls in equity prices. If we look at this chart here, this is one of my favorite charts. It just shows the S&P 500, the top 500 companies in America, and their returns on an annual basis. You see that the red lines at the bottom are less common than the green ones at the top, but they're still pretty common. And it's not unusual to see big 20% declines in a single year. Okay, next question. This is from Teresa. What is a brokerage account? Does it have any benefits, and should everyone who is investing be investing opening up a brokerage account, and who with? To me, brokerage account is a slightly like an Americanized way of, saying a broker. It's just basically the place where you buy into different investments. So, I go to my bank and put money in there. I have a bank account. I go to the market. Sorry, I need to mute the sound. But yeah, if I want to invest through the market, I do that through a broker on my brokerage account. Who the best is, I'll leave a video below looking at who I think is the best this year. And I redo that every April. As well as that, we have a broker comparison tool that we've built. And I'll link that below as well. You can see it on screen here. Lots of filters and options. Really proud of it, to be honest, and we continue to develop it. So that's Teresa. Really should start missing some of these shots. Okay, Dilakshi said, what should we do with money collecting dust in limited companies, specifically limited company investing? I understand that there are risks to losing your BADR if you invest too much. BADR, for context, is, oh no, I missed, business asset disposal relief. So when you sell the business, you get to take the money out of the business at a more favourable tax rate. I'm not, an expert in investing through a company. Let me just tell you what I do so that maybe that can help. So I have this YouTube channel. I also have a newsletter and I have a podcast. All three are separate companies. I then have an investing company that I funnel the profits from those businesses into, and I buy, a global index fund typically. So I have a holding company above all three of those companies that owns my share in those businesses, and then we move the money around. The investment company, so the reason I have that separate is because, as you allude to there can be issues whereby if your trading company, so this YouTube channel, if the assets held in investments become too large, it can shift the definition of what the business is, and that can cause issues around taxation or just the classification of that business, is my understanding. As I say, I'm not an accountant. What I do then is I invest in global equities, and I also have like money market funds for short-term cash through that investment company. And I do that with InvestEngine. I'll link them below. I find the platform's really good for this. They have a business kind of investment stuff as account. And then I'm also probably, if the money in there gets too large, I'll open, say, an AJ Bell one as well. I think they offer a service, and I'll just spread it around a few different platforms. Yeah, as it stands at the minute, global ETF till I die. I buy a global index fund through my investment company, and that at the minute, the provider is InvestEngine. I hope that answers your question. Okay, Luke. When you have a fund within a fund, e.g. Vanguard's life strategy range, do you effectively get the fees doubled? Meaning there are fees within fees. It's a really good question. Got that in. So I'm going to speak specifically about life strategy fund. I can't speak for every single fund on the market. Life strategy as a fund is a fund of funds. So if you look at what's within the life strategy fund, which are one of Vanguard's most popular options, if you go on the Vanguard UK website, you'll see them promoted as the top fund that they like to push to people. It's a collection of 10, 12, whatever, of their other funds. The fund itself has a fee, I believe it's about 0.22%, something like that. Don't fact check me on that. And that supersedes the other fund fees. So I did some research and I took a look. You're not getting double layers of fees in that case. So the fund fee that they charge you supersedes all the other fees, and that's the fee that you pay for investing in that blended product. It's worth noting, though, that there's potentially, if you were to recreate the fund yourself, you might be able to do it cheaper, because I do believe there's a premium added to the Life Strategy Fund for the kind of off-the-shelf nature of the fund. Now, obviously, doing it yourself is going to be a lot more work, because you've got to combine all those funds together with the balance that they have, and then you've got to rebalance that on an annual basis or whatever. But no, in the Life Strategy case which you gave, there's not 2 layers of fees. Okay, Phil. If I own a 212 stocks and shares ISA and a 212 cash ISA, is it possible and legal to swap funds between the two? I went directly to Trading 212 to ask about this, and they said I can quote them on this, and here's the message on screen. They said yes, as long as you stay within the ISA limits. Oh, I missed, genuinely missed. Helen, I am retired and have a 3.5 million portfolio, excluding property and pensions. Wow. How and where can I start to dip my toes into Bitcoin investing directly? It then says that she has Coinbase and that she has global indexes, but she quite fancies dabbling a tiny little bit. Okay. Wow. I'm going to pretend that I didn't try and get that one in. Okay. I should say, first of all, that buying cryptocurrency is, highly risky. I know loads of people are going to be like, the biggest risk is not owning cryptocurrency. And that's your opinion. But from a compliance standpoint, it's still largely unregulated. There's little in the way of protection. And if certain, platforms go down, you can potentially lose everything. We saw a lot of this with like FTX and things, right? So I do have to say that, and it is true. The regulatory frameworks that exist around stock purchases do not exist around cryptocurrency. There is definitely increased risk there. You've done really well in terms of you've got a huge portfolio. You've also said that doesn't include your pension or your property. So there's potentially millions knocking about there. So you clearly are not investing in cryptocurrency to make yourself rich. You might just want a bit of exposure, and that's okay. That's okay, that's your choice. But I would manage that exposure, so that it was comfortable that if you were to lose everything, it didn't, sink your retirement plans. What is that to you? Is that 1% or whatever? And then maybe you could just start buying consistently on a monthly basis through a platform like Coinbase, if that's your platform of choice. If you just want to dabble, then just dabble. You could do £10, £50 a month, whatever. Most people will say that an allocation between 1% and 5% into Bitcoin is seen as, 1% is on the more conservative end and 5% is a little bit more racy. You need to define what you're comfortable with there, because 5% of your net worth is a significant amount of money, right? I don't know. I think you know what you're doing. I think you just need the kind of the confidence, or for me to say, you go ahead and buy 50 quid's worth and see what happens from there. But anyway, yeah, good luck with that, and well done on your mentally sized portfolio. Having a great time. Nadine, we initially paid our advisor around a 2k fee with an ongoing fee of 0.75% a year. While his help setting up our investments and transferring them to tax-efficient wrappers was invaluable, I'm now questioning the continued value of his oversight. Should we part ways with our financial advisor, even though this might incur an exit fee? If so, how should we approach this, considering he's become a trusted family contact? Okay, let's look at this a few ways, shall we? I'm going to keep this in front of me, the question, so we can go through it. So they charge a 2k initial fee and are now charging 0.75% a year. And I imagine you're thinking that 0.75 a year is a lot, but also any investment fees on top of that potentially for the wealth accumulation phase of your journey. My view on advisors has shifted in recent years in terms of, do I think they're useful? I think in the past I was kind of a bit skeptical of them, and through interacting with lots of them through this channel and on the podcast, I actually see that they have value in different stages. I think the value of an advisor in getting people started, or at the end of their journey in the decumulation phase, let's call it, whereby they're looking at how do I tax efficiently take my money out, estate planning, trust, these kind of things. I think they have loads of value there. I think Are they valuable in the accumulation phase is up for debate. An advisor just basically charging you a % a year to just put you into a global index fund for 30, 40 years. I think the debate there is, if you're the kind of person who watches this kind of content and thinks you understand that and could do that yourself, well, then that's just an added layer of fees, isn't it? If you're the kind of person who would never invest without the support of an advisor, well, that's an invaluable service still. Whatever gets people investing is fine by me, but I do think there's probably a lot of people that are with advisors who could do it themselves. That part of the journey, that accumulation part. The decumulation, I think even I will get to a point one day where I go, just hand that over to someone else so that I can go enjoy my retirement and they can manage the numbers. Okay. So I can't really say if you should or shouldn't leave the advisor. I'm just going to put that to you and let you consider it from there. The next bits, so exit fees and, this whole breaking up with them. So let's talk about breaking up with them first of all. The question I have for you, Nadine, is if you stop using this person's services, will they call in and check on you? Will they still be a family friend or trusted contact? Or are they just going to disappear? Because if the answer is they're just going to disappear, well, it's a business relationship, isn't it? And unfortunately or fortunately, advisors probably try and get themselves into the family network because it's a really strong position for them to be in, to be seen almost like, your doctor or whatever. This family friend kind of vibe really suits the advisor. It's great for them. So just ask yourself the question, if I said to my advisor tomorrow, I don't want to use your services anymore, are they still going to pop round for a cup of tea? Because if they are, then maybe they are your mate. If they're not, it's just a business relationship and treat it as such. In terms of the exit fees can be really nasty and it can make a big difference as to whether you actually leave them or not. Maybe there's two ways that you could do this. You could do staged withdrawals. So if you sit down with the advisor and you say, what are the exit fees? They might say that any money that's been with me less than 2 years has an XY fee on it. So you go, okay, any money that has been over that, we can start to transfer that out so we avoid the exit fees. And you just move chunks out at a time like this. Or you could start investing on your own on the side in tandem with using the advisor still and just see if you are comfortable or whatever. Or you could, sit down, work out how much the exit fees are and think, is this worth it or not? I hope you understand I can't answer those questions for you directly, but there's a few different ways to think about it. I think the key thing there is the trusted family contact point and this kind of point that they advisors make people feel like they're their friends, they're salesmen at the end of the day, or women. Okay, get rid of that one, straight in the bin, just like your advisor. Stephanos, what happens to our investments if we leave the UK? Can we still use our stocks and shares ISA account, or should we move all of our investments to brokerage accounts of the country we move to? So Stephanos, from my understanding, you can continue to have your investments inside of those wrappers in the UK, and they will still continue to benefit from the tax wrapper status here. You can't contribute any more money into that product because you're not a UK taxpayer, say. And the real issue is the country you move to might not recognise the tax-free status or the tax wrapper status, whatever that is, pension, ISA, of that product. So you could move to a country whereby you go, well, I've got an ISA here, and you take money out and they go, no, that's income, we're taxing it. So like many things, unfortunately, it depends where you're going. I'd encourage you to find out if I'm moving to, Spain or Portugal or Venezuela, how would they treat this individual product? And then you can make a decision from there. If you know that they're going to say, well, we honour the tax-free status of your ISA, you might as well potentially leave the ISA in the UK to continue to grow and compound away, because when you pull the money out, that it's not going to be taxed. If they're going to tax it, shape your opinion, right? Okay. Alana. Can I do an ISA transfer from Vanguard if the equivalent fund doesn't exist on Trading 212? And if I can't transfer, will the alternative be to sell my assets and repurchase a similar fund on Trading 212? My concern is that if I reinvest a lump sum with 212, I will lose the pound cost averaging I've built up over the years. Okay, I see this point a lot about pound cost averaging, and we'll get onto that. technically from moving from a Vanguard to a trading 212 or from this broker to that broker, they can only move the investments if the investments are on both platforms. So, if you're coming from a life strategy fund with Vanguard to trading 212, they don't offer those funds, so you're not going to be able to move it. And what you have to do is it either happens automatically where it's converted to cash and moved, or you sell the investments to cash and then move the cash over and buy a similar investment on 212. A sort of global portfolio would work. 212, I believe, as well, have certain pies that look to mimic the life strategy fund. So I do think there are kind of like for like, but they're not life strategy, so it wouldn't move directly across. The most important point here, though, is the pound cost averaging point. Let me give you an example, right? If I buy an investment for £1 and it increases in value to £10, it's going to show on my brokerage account, we know what one of those is now, that the value of that's gone up by £9. And we get to look at that and it'd be like, oh, look at all that money we've earned, £9. It looks great, big 9 in green. When we move our portfolio from Vanguard to 212, that £10 is sold, it's moved over. We buy on trading 212 and we buy £10 worth of investments because we've moved the 10 quid. We still have the 10 quid, but what we've lost is that little number that says it's gone up from £1 to 9. But that doesn't change the fact that that's happened. You don't lose the benefits of pound cost averaging by doing that. The only thing really that you stand to lose is the gap between when you sell your investments to cash over here and move them over here, you're out of the market in that period. So depending on whatever the market does in those few days or weeks, that's what you stand to lose. If the market doubled in that time, you would have missed out on those gains. If the market halves in that time, you've benefited. That's the real potential loss here. But you don't lose the benefits of pound cost averaging by moving your investments to another place and buying in. You just have a new buy-in point, which means that your graph is not going to look as nice as it did before. I hope that makes sense. Right, next question. Mark, I've done a lot of Googling and watched a lot of YouTube videos about gilts, but I'm not confident that I'm understanding it at all. As I understand it, there are many different ways you can buy gilts and many different variations and types of gilts, and the way they're impacted by different market conditions. There are lots of variables and it's not always clear what variety of gilt people are on about when they talk about them. All right, Mark, well, I am not the gilt or bond master at all, and I would rather refer you to the guy that I think is. Below in the description is a conversation I had with Ramin, Nikisa of Pensioncraft, the Bond King, Mr. Bond. Anyway, I'll link that, and I'll also link a couple of his other episodes where I think, they go into a lot of detail. My lack of understanding around bonds and gilts and things like this is because I don't use the products very much, and maybe that will change over time, and maybe I can look at them more. But because they're just not something that I use, I don't think I should sit here and talk about them like I'm some kind of expert when he really is the guy who knows everything there. Okay, Ravi, what real investment percentage growth do you use when you do your own financial modelling? So this would be percentage post-inflation and fees. Of course, it's based on the investment, but I'm just referring to a low-cost global index fund. So for me personally, mate, I tend to model, say, like 5% as real, and then or 4%, and I flip between the two just to see where I'm at. And that's based on the data that's produced every year, the UBS handbook. I think it's what are the names? I've got them here, hold on. Yeah, Dimson, Marsh and Staunton. Yeah, the Dimson, Marsh and Staunton data set, which pins global real returns at just above 5%. So yeah, 4-5% is kind of where I work it out at once you've got fees. Using our compound interest calculator as well, you can add the fees element here. You see the boxes here, you can do that. But I tend to base it on 4-5% personally. Okay. Alec, I understand that a W8 Ben form lowers the tax that the USA takes from 30% to 15%. But when is the tax actually collected? And how does it affect the profitability of US-based funds and investments? I'm trying to determine how it affects ROI. So the tax is taken at source and will be 15% of the dividends that you receive. So, whatever the quoted dividend is, you're losing 15% of it basically. So that's how it's going to affect the ROI. A lot of the American, it depends who you're invested in, but if you're invested in the S&P 500, a large part of the S&P 500 is the big tech giants who tend to not be that generous around dividends at this point. So a lot of the growth in the S&P 500 especially has been through the growth in the valuation of those businesses. And that isn't impacted by the withholding tax. Okay, next one. John, I'm 31 years old and currently investing 15% of my gross income into my retirement, 6.8% via my employee's DB care scheme and the other 8.2% into my SIPP. I often see YouTube videos titled SIPP versus ISA, which is better, but I don't see much about how to use them in tandem. Do you have any advice on the optimal weighting between an ISA and a SIPP, given I'd like to retire before state DB pension age, and therefore should I be splitting the 8.2% with stocks and shares ISAs too? So you're in quite a good position there, mate, where you've got that DB scheme, the defined benefit care scheme. And what that means is that you're going to get a certain level of income guaranteed for you. And I believe the age that kicks in is 65. But with DB schemes, you're quite a young bloke. That age can go up. It's not, it's not unreasonable to think that by the time you access it, it might be 70, say. And what that means for you is you might want to retire before that, as you've alluded to. So you need something that bridges the gap between when you want to retire and when they say that you can access that scheme. A SIPP, you typically are able to access the benefits of a SIPP 10 years before the state retirement age. There's nothing locking them in place as a certain, but they tend to move at the same rate, So if state pension becomes 70, the point you could access your SIPP or your own private pension is 60. It's criminal that they do that. They shouldn't, in my opinion. State pension age, yeah, if you want to jack that up, I guess, there's an argument there, but I think the jacking up of the private pensions in tandem is just a way to keep people in work longer to raise more taxes. Anyway, the way that you can really kind of get around all of that is through an ISA. A stocks and shares ISA, while on paper paying into a pension is probably a better overall option in terms of the amount of money that you get, the ISA gives you flexibility over time, which is the most valuable asset that we all have. So, for me personally, I contribute to a stocks and shares ISA to have that level of flexibility. And I think anyone with a DB scheme, anyone within the public sector, doctors, all of this, I got a mate who's a doctor, has a really good pension, but doesn't know when he'll be able to access it. So he contributes to a stocks and shares ISA so he can bridge that gap. And I think that's probably how you would think about it if you want that certainty over time. Stuart, financial advisors always tell us to max out our pensions because of employer contributions and tax relief. But isn't this just a Trojan horse? The government controls when we access it, how it's taxed, and even inheritance rules. Meanwhile, state pension deferral looks like a great deal, but actually benefits the government more than retirees. Wouldn't it make more sense to focus on assets and ISAs where you have more control, flexibility, and tax efficiency? Okay. Trojan horse, lovely way of saying it. First of all, the trend in terms of pensions in my lifetime has been more choice, more access, more control for the consumer, for me. So this ability to access it, and take out a bigger lump sum and all of these things. Obviously, there is the growing shift and trend in terms of the age that we can access these things is rising. And also there's been the recent changes around taxation in terms of they're now included within your estate, or they will be from 2027, I believe. So, there's a higher potential tax liability for people going forwards. But this tax liability existed on ISAs prior to that. They would have been included within the estate, right? I love the pension structure. I think it provides so many benefits to individuals, and the fact that it locks it away specifically for retirement is a really powerful kind of nudge in the right direction for people, because people will just find ways to spend money that they can access. Also, the auto-enrollment benefit of the employer match and the tax benefits added on. This is the closest thing to a free lunch you get. It's literally a doubling of the money that goes into your pension. So even if the assets don't grow at all, if the stock market just flatlined like this, you're still doubling the money that goes in anyway. So we should grab that with both hands. I think, you say there around, should we just focus on ISAs because pension rules could change? ISA rules could change. There's lots of speculation at the minute around Rachel Reeves slashing cash ISA rates. I think a lot of this is just that speculation. I don't think that we should react or do anything based on speculation and news circulation like this I think a lot of it's to do with Torsten Bell, who used to be the head of the Resolution Foundation, who wrote a paper in the past called ISA Baby, where they spoke about capping ISAs at 100K. These kind of stories get a lot of clicks. I know because I made a video at the time and it got 250,000 views. But we see this kind of, they're going to mess with our ISA kind of chat emerge every 12 months. And it rarely ever happens. They basically just do nothing. I don't think we can say confidently though, that, they mess with pensions all the time and they'll never mess with ISAs. The possibility's there for both. I think the best thing for an individual to do is to spread their retirement planning across a range of products with a range of rules, because unfortunately we don't have the ability to say over the next 30 years the rules aren't going to change. So what that means is we need to have options. And I don't think pensions are a scam. With a Trojan horse, I don't really know what you mean in terms of the context. I just see little guys jumping out with swords going, ha ha. So for me personally, I have a pension, I have an ISA for the reasons that I've already got out in the video. Is there a point where topping up to maximise state pension is less worth it due to the extra tax payable? I think this is a great question. So typically, it costs around £900 to buy an extra year of national insurance, and that will get you around £300 a year in state pension, just rounding the figures down and up to make it easier to wrap our head around. So that means that £900 takes you about 3 years to see your money back. That is a great return on investment. So if you can buy years of national insurance, typically the best answer is to do those, right? Only obviously if, at my age, I wouldn't buy them because I've got plenty of years ahead of me to work and to earn them through normal taxation. But if you're approaching state pension age and you've got missing years, that calculation is pretty good. Where it becomes maybe slightly more unclear is if by purchasing those years, it pushes you into a higher tax rate. So that means then that you enter into, say, a 40% tax rate. But even then, if that gain is taxed at 40%, it might take you from 3 years to 5 years to see that benefit because of the tax rate. I still think that that's a good return on investment. I still think that, if I said to you, give me a pot of money and I'll give you all of your money back in 5 years and then anything beyond that is just gravy, I'm taking that investment, right? And then I also think that, tax in terms of income, other taxes, very disputable, but income taxes are always on a gain as such. So apart from certain tax traps that exist, there's always a apart from. But in the main, you're only taxed on when you earn more money. So crossing into the 40% band, you're only paying 40% on the amount that's above that, and you're still going to end up with more than if you didn't do it. So I don't know if there's ever a position where I would go, I don't want that income because it's going to push me into a higher tax band, because I'm still going to end up with more than if I didn't do it. Yeah, it's just going to take longer for the return on investment for buying those extra years. Ashley, I'm a 34-year-old dad of 3 with a 5-bed detached mortgage in the south of England, currently earn 55k a year and I invest £30 a month across different funds. I'm in a workplace pension and contribute £145 a month, which my employer then matches. My question, should I be concerned that I won't have enough for retirement? It's a great question, Ashley. Sounds like you're, carrying a lot of responsibility there, mate. So first of all, ease up on yourself and don't beat yourself up here about where you are at the minute. What I would say is that by sitting here and going, am I saving enough and should I be worried? You're asking the right question, which I tend to think follows the outcome of you actually being prepared. The one thing though that I take from your situation is young kids, mortgage, you're a young man, you've got plenty of time ahead of you. And what we know from retirement savings is every time we ever discuss them, people talk about them like this, as if you start at the age of 18 or 20 and you contribute the same amount every single month until you retire. And most compound interest calculators and forecasts will calculate a linear savings approach. What I mean by that is, if you save £200 every month until you retire. Most people's life and saving habits are not like that. I made a video, which I'll link below for you, that I really think you should watch, where I show how, through research from the ONS, the optimal savings rate for many people is quite bumpy. So typically, ideally, if you can, in your early 20s, you save a little bit. When you have kids, it goes to near zero. And then once your kids leave home, it shoots up again. And you're saving like a quarter of your income or more to catch up. The way the ONS rationalised that, this is how it looked, is for smoothing out lifetime spending. So what they were looking at is, how do we make sure that someone has a good quality of life in their 20s, 30s, 40s and 50s, manages to pay for everything that they need to, manages to hit key milestones in their life, like having kids and buying a house, but also manages to save for retirement. And the conclusion was that it might be optimal to dial up and down your savings rates. You're doing great at the minute, mate. You're saving, I imagine, what you can. Maybe look at your expenditure and go, is there any areas here that I could cut back on? But also understand, once the kids leave home, once they grow up and stuff, you're going to have loads more money and you can fire that into your retirement savings. So just do what you can and be kind on yourself. Don't sit there going, God, I'm not saving £1,000 a month right now. Ideally, it would be ideal if you were, of course, but there's plenty of life ahead of you. So yeah, watch that video. I think it'll really help you understand, the way that you can think about saving while raising your kids. Tom, it's always mentioned that an individual is allowed to contribute 60k into their pension in a tax year. Is this gross or net of tax relief? It is gross of tax relief. So that means, 60k total can go in after tax relief or anything has been added back on. Okay. Berkeley, can you give some guidance on pensions for self-employed people? Yes, I can. So first of all, I think we need to separate the two types of self-employed people as I see them. We have sole traders, so individuals who might just work for themselves, one-man bands, plumbers, electricians, or owners and operators of smaller businesses. And then we have, God, I'm dying today, limited company directors. Someone like myself, technically I'm employed by my limited company as a director, but I would still see myself as self-employed. The directors of limited company ones, really easy. The benefit of paying into your pension is amazing because you can pay that money in from your limited company directly into your pension. And what that essentially does is it gets the money out of your limited company into your personal name. Yes, you can't access that money until you retire or of retirement age, but that movement happens. You get it out of the business into your personal name. And there's no tax for doing that. There's not even corporation tax. So you get to get that money out of the business, put it in your personal name, and that money is free of corporation tax, which is an amazing benefit. The first thing I look to do with profits inside my business is get it into my pension. Okay, sole traders, this is where it gets a little bit more, I think the need here is greater. Only 1 in 6 sole traders or self-employed people or whatever you want to call them, there might be partnerships or whatever, self-employed that aren't limited company directors are paying into their pension, 1 in 6. So the majority aren't, and I can understand why, because their incomes are bumpy, they're probably trying to build their business and they're concerned about locking away, cash for decades that they might need. It's also not a no-brainer like it is for staff members that work full-time where they get the employer match. There's no employer match because they are the employer. I'd really encourage you to just tuck away even just a little bit for your future, because the way I think about it is the reason you're building this business is to support you and for your business to pay into your pension, and then you get to retirement and go, I'm retired now because of that business. Surely that's the main aim of the business, right? That is the goal, and that is a wonderful thing for you to build. I get, though, that flexibility over funds might be a concern, and you might think I might need that money. So if you're not comfortable setting up a SIPP and paying into that and getting the tax relief benefits of that, you could look at doing an ISA because you can access the money. Yes, the tax relief benefits are not as good with the pension, but the money isn't taxed on the way out and you can get at the money. Or you could look at a LISA, a lifetime ISA. You get the tax relief benefits there because if you put up to £4,000 a year in, the government will uplift it to £1,000. So by £1,000, to 5k. So if you're a 20% taxpayer, that's like the same relief that you get through a pension, but you can get at the money. you actually end up worse off if you do access the money than if you went in, because there's a penalty on the way out based on the total amount, which is stupid. It punishes people, but you can get at the money, but there's still a block from you doing it. So it's like, in a worst case emergency, I can get the money if I need it, but there's a barrier to doing that, unlike with an ISA where you can take it whenever you want, kind of thing. So there's two options there that offer like a happy medium between flexibility of access and still incentivizing you to save long term. Please, self-employed people watching this, start some kind of retirement pension savings, because the years will just tick by and you'll get to a point where you're like, oh God, I've saved nothing here, and you'll have to continue working. And I think, you're the backbone of the British economy. You're the kind of people that have gone out on a limb and taken a risk and been like, I'm backing my own efforts and I'm going out there and selling my services. Reward yourself by saving for your retirement. Okay. Ali. As a teacher, I'm told our pensions are incredible, but when I look at calculators, additional payments seem like they'd be better in a stocks and shares ISA. Please, can you explain why teachers' pensions are so good? Nailed it. So they're great because they're defined benefit, I believe. And what I mean by that is you're going to get some form of guarantee around income. I've actually got some figures here. Yeah, I got them here, look. So this was just a quick look. I don't know these schemes very well, so it's why I avoid talking about them. But there's an effective employer contribution of 28.6%, according to my research. So they pay in 28.6% of your salary. That's an insane benefit. It's the same with all the doctors and all of the other schemes that we've talked about, whereby because it's in control of, it's like a public sector pension, there might be limitations around when you can access it, and those dates might change. So you might want to build up a stocks and shares ISA for flexibility. But pensions within the public sector, nurses, doctors, police, all these roles, the pension is one of the main benefits of doing that work. They are really incredibly valuable. Dan, once I've increased my workplace pension contributions to meet the match, where should I stick the rest to hit my personal 18% retirement savings target? I can't tell you where you should put it because it completely depends on your circumstances, but a couple of things to consider. If the pension that you have at work is salary sacrifice, there's going to be a national insurance saving there on top of the contributions that on top of just the basic tax relief on the income tax levels. So that can mean that paying into your salary sacrifice pension paying into your pension via salary sacrifice, I should say, provides an additional layer of benefit through the saving of NI, especially if your employer then pays the NI saving on their side into your pension. Does that happen? Go work that out, because that would inform your decision. Then beyond there, are you happy with your workplace provider? Are you only in it because of the employer match, or do you really like the funds? Do you really like the fees? Do you really like the way it's run? Me, in the past, when I was in employer schemes, I didn't like the schemes. I just did it to get the match. As soon as I left and went self-employed, I transferred the money out into my own SIPP, and now I manage it. So if you want more control or you don't like the provider, that's going to inform your decision. And then finally, the flexibility point that we've discussed with ISAs. Do you want the ability to just say, I want to retire at this date, even if the age of retirement is shifted away from me? Good luck with that, mate. 18% is a great target. Man. Should we combine all our pension pots? For example, I have a pension pot with company A, but I have now left that company and joined company B. Should I combine company A's pension pot and company B's pension pot? Okay, it depends. First of all, the key message in here that an advisor would give is be really careful about smashing together pension pots that you don't lose benefits that are associated with the previous ones. The older the pension pot is, the more likely it is to have really generous benefits around things like guaranteed annuity rates, tax-free lump sum rates, or you could be in like a defined benefit scheme if you worked in the public sector, and horror stories about people dragging the money out of those because they want to combine it all together and losing that guaranteed income. So depending on the size of the pot, if you've got a really big pension pot from a previous employer and the age of it, I'd be really cautious about smashing them together until you're really clear on what the benefits are. Call the pension provider and say, What benefits will I lose by migrating this pension to one of the other ones? And if you're unsure and it's a lot of money, go speak to a financial advisor, get them to look over it all and go, should I smash these together? If this is hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of decision, it's worth spending a little bit of money to get, clued up on that. For me personally, I smashed mine together because I had little pots of like £1,000 here, a few grand there with different providers. I wanted to bring them all into one so that I could reduce the fees and stuff. And also at the time, I think they got rid of these kind of fees. There were fees like inactivity fees. So you were charged more if you weren't paying into the pension. So I smashed them together to avoid those fees. And that isn't a direct answer to your question. I'm not a financial advisor. I can't answer it. I hope you understand, but I hope that helps. Okay, Matt. I have a workplace pension with Scottish Widows. The total fees I pay are about 1% annually. Looking at the calculation has made me quite sick on how much I'm missing out on over the course of 28 years. Approximately 100k difference. If I were to open a SIPP with another provider whose management fees and fund fees were cheaper, how would I do this? Do I transfer the whole pot in one go and then do the transfer on a monthly, yearly basis? I guess I would check the transfer fees Scottish Widows would charge and see if it works out better. You partly answered the question yourself, but what you want to know is, do they allow partial transfers? So you need to go to Scottish Widows and say, do you accept partial transfers? And most importantly, if I make a partial transfer out of your scheme into my own SIPP, am I still allowed to be in the work-based scheme? Don't get kicked out of the scheme and make sure you ask them what are the minimum requirements. Scottish Widows might say, you need to have at least £1,000 with us and be paying in on a regular basis to avoid being kicked out of the scheme. So, if they say, yes, we allow partial transfers, okay, what are the minimum requirements to remain in the scheme? Because you want to remain in the scheme. And then you could just make that transfer on an annual basis or whatever. And check there are no fees or anything like that, of course. Okay, James. I'm often told how good NHS pension is, but it looks like only 1/54th of my salary is actually put into it each year. Could you explain how this compares to private company pensions? Your pension is what's known as a defined benefit pension. And what that means is the benefit you get at the end is predefined. So you will get a guaranteed income for life. Amazing. My pension and anyone who isn't in that kind of career gets a defined contribution pension. The amount you end up with is defined by how much you contribute into it. So at the end, your pot is based on what have you paid in and how well has that performed. Your pot is like, as long as you pay in X, Y, Z of your income, we will give you this amount of income for life. So very different. Yours is very valuable. And there's a reason they're not very common anymore because of the fact that, they're just so expensive to run. I believe why they still exist in the public sector for now, even though they're making them less and less valuable over time through certain tweaking around the edges is because it's one of the main draws for staff to continue to work in the public sector, because the public sector doesn't really compete with the private sector in terms of what it pays people, month in, month out, but the pensions are so much more valuable than a lot of private sector pensions. John. My work pension is with Nest, relief at source. I earn 45k and contribute 4%. Employed does 3%. Nest gives me back the standard 20%. I also work as self-employed at weekends and submit self-assessments for this. My total 2023-2024 income was 57k for both employed and self-employed work. Am I now able to claim back the higher rate pension relief on my Nest contributions that were originally made through PAYE? If so, how, as I've already submitted my self-assessment for that year? Okay, I've got the steps here written down. You can call them, you can write to them as well, and the answer is yes, you should be able to claim a bit back. So you log into the HMRC self-assessment account, you go to self-assessment and select the 2023-2024 tax year and choose amend return. Then go to the section tax reliefs and find the box for pension contributions where relief at source applies and enter the gross pension contribution. I believe that's 2,250 in this case. Submit the amendment and HMRC will process the change and issue a tax refund. If you don't want to do all of that though, just give them a call or write to them, mate. Okay, next is Adrian. I often use my pension company's calculator to try and work out my income when I hit retirement age. I know it's only an illustration, but I get vastly different answers from different providers with the same parameters. How accurate are these calculators? They're not accurate at all. They're just a guide. But the reason you're getting different outcomes in different places is because of the assumptions that they make. So every calculator will bake in different parameters and assumptions. Otherwise, they're going to ask you to fill out so many fields that people just wouldn't do it because they wouldn't know the answers. Each calculator below it will have like small print that says, we assume X, Y, Z. Go and look at what those are. For example, a lot of the ones that are really simple assume that you will uplift your contributions in line with inflation, or they assume a rate of growth and things like this. That's why you're getting vastly different numbers. I hate to plug it again, but with our compound interest calculator, you can have more control through the advanced mode of the parameters that you plug in. But we also make some assumptions as well, and we list those on there. So yeah, it's the assumptions. That's what's going on. Okay, Nathan, how should you calculate the total final figure you need for retirement you want? The calculators I've seen online only look at a target annual pension income rather than a total pension fund value to aim for. So the rough rules of thumb are you take the amount that you want on an annual basis, the amount of income, and you multiply that by 25 or 33. The difference between the two is multiplying it by 25 is that will give you a pot that you can withdraw 4% from a year, and multiplying it by 33 is 3%. The 3% is more conservative than the 4%. So yeah, you'll get different pots. So, based on how conservative you want to be. That'll give you the big number. The problem with that big number is it's not adjusted for inflation either. And I think this gets to the point that I really want to make around your question. Retirement is a moving target. It's like this. We're just trying to hit it as we go through life. But if I worked out what I would need for retirement at 21, I would almost laugh at that now because of the more money I spend today than I did back then. So every few years and every time I get a pay rise, targets like this, I'm just recalculating what I need and where I need to be and making sure that I'm on track. We're kind of, we're heading to this point of retirement and we're going like this, and at some point it all meets together and we hope that we've done enough. But yeah, you can't just sit there in your 20s and go, right, that's the number, and then, that'll do. Because by the time you're 40 or 50, your expenditure might look vastly different. Life will have been different. You might have had kids, all these kind of things. So you need to be constantly doing that. But what I would say is you work out how much you want to spend in retirement, and then you multiply that number by 25 or 33 as a really rough guess. If you're unsure about where those numbers sit at the minute, you could look at the PLSA, which provides some guidance. People criticize them as being too high or too low, the numbers, but they're a flag in the ground. They're a place to start, and they give people an idea anyway. And then as well as that, you want to adjust for inflation. So the way that you could do that is the big pot that you get today, say you go, okay, my expenditure at the minute is 20 grand a year, times that by 25, and you get that big number. You could then run that number through an inflation calculator and go, what is that number, that big number, compounded by 2 or 3% over the next 30 years, and that'll give you the really big number. That's going to be a big, scary number though. But don't forget that, as inflation erodes the purchasing power of currency over time, you should see wages grow and your ability to save in nominal rate will go up as well. Or another way of doing it is going, okay, I want to hit this number that I've got today, 20K times by 25. But when I work out my investment returns, instead of going, investments will grow at 8% a year, I'll put 4% or 5% because you're adjusting for inflation. And then if you hit that pot over the 30-year timeline, that the spending power of that pot has been protected, basically. I hope that helps. Right, next one. Phil, is a DB pension a hedge against market dips and an alternative to an emergency fund? Could you take a bit more risk on the DC pot knowing that you are guaranteed DB income? A DB pension, in a way, is like a form of insurance, isn't it? Because it gives you a guaranteed income. So yeah, it's kind of like a hedge, if you will, because you know that you're going to get this pot that might be indexed as well, so rise with inflation. I don't know the specifics of your scheme. But yeah, it's like an annuity almost in the sense that it pays out and you know you're going to get it until the day you die. So it provides a real big safety net. Taking more risk with the DC scheme, your defined contribution scheme. Why are you taking that risk? Is it because you need to take the risk in order to hit your goal? Or is it because you just want the buzz? if you've sat down and gone, we're going to have a shortfall here between what we want to spend and where we're going to be, that should inform your investing approach around your DC scheme. If you gave me 100 million quid today, do I need to be racy with it? Or do I just go, oh, well, I'll just park it somewhere pretty safe that just outruns inflation because, I've completed the money game. And then in terms of, if it's just because you want to buzz, what I would encourage you to do is always to have a pot of money that, if you're that way inclined like myself, have a pot of money that you can be a bit more speculative with, that keeps your hands busy so that you're not risking the kingdom for a pot of gold. Yeah? But yeah, if you've got a DB scheme that you know is going to get you 90% of the way there to your spending needs, then maybe you can say, well, I can just be 100% equities within my DC scheme. I'm 100% equities within my DC scheme anyway, because I'm young, I think I understand risk pretty well, and because, in my eyes, 100% equity exposure is the best chance of me getting the biggest pot possible and producing a solid retirement. I hope that helps. Barry, how do I claim tax back on pensions when I've been told by HMRC I can't do self-assessment because I don't meet the criteria? Interesting that they told you don't meet the criteria. I would like to know what they mean by that. But yeah, contact them. Just give them a call, write to them, and do it that way. Nemeti, my question is about sequencing risk, namely preparing for it. The advice is to build up a cash buffer to last for 2 to 5 years of expenses to avoid needing to sell your investments during a market downturn at the beginning of your retirement. But what if the market downturn happens while one is about to or in the process of building that buffer? So the idea with the buffer would be that you build it prior to needing it. So maybe at 50 or 55, you're like, okay, I'm going to retire at 60, and you spend that period building up that cash buffer. You don't, the ideal situation would be to be building the buffer before you need to draw on the assets. So you're not forced to draw on the assets if there's a market downturn. If you're in a position where, let's say, you realize later in life about protecting against sequencing risk and you're a couple of years out from retirement, and you're building up your buffer, and then there's a market crash, and you need to draw on the retirement pot because you've not got enough cash buffer. There's two options really. Use the cash buffer that you have built up and hope it's enough to see out the downturn, or extend how long you work for before pulling the money off the pot. Or pull the money off the pot and understand that the sequencing risk is that that's potentially going to severely reduce the amount of time that pot lasts for in retirement. Just to clarify, that sequencing risk is this idea that in the first few years of retirement, if there is a market downturn and you're drawing off that pot, you severely impact the life that pot has in it. So while before the crash it might have lasted you to 100, in those first early years, you're essentially kicking your pot while it's down, it's falling, and you're taking money out of it. And that might reduce the timeline down by like 15 years or such. That's the sequencing risk. And we mitigate around that by having large cash or cash-like equivalent reserves that we can lean on so that we don't kick the portfolio while it's down. I hope that answers your question. Amir, do you have any advice on how to combine all previous pension pots with old employers into one pension? I basically answered that, so let's look at it a different way. So let's say you asked all of the questions. Oh no, I missed. Let's say we've asked all the questions before about, sorry, my head hurts. Let's say we've asked all the questions before about, should I be doing this? Is it smart to combine them? Am I losing any benefits? Whatever the bloody word is about how you actually do it is really straightforward. Go to your previous employers. Let's assume you don't even know where these pensions are, but you've somehow checked if you're going to lose the benefits. But anyway, you can go to previous employers and say, who was the pension with when I was there? Contact the pension provider and log in. It's like, I forgot my password, jobby. Once you're in, get the policy number and the amount that is in the pension. Go to your new provider where you want to move it to and initiate a transfer process. They will have a big button that goes transfer in because they want those funds. They want the assets under management. You push transfer, what's your policy number, how much do you want to move, bang it in, press go, job's a good one. Okay, this is a big question from Richard. There is oodles of advice out there about pension contributions, how much money you need to retire and the like. However, none of the videos seem to answer the fact that lifestyle costs and bills will change significantly in that period. For example, by the time I retire, our mortgage will be paid and some of our current bills will have reduced while others, due to inflation, will have increased. So how best should one calculate their bills and cost of living to work out the amount of money needed to retire? Okay, you need to sit down and work this out for yourself. The first thing is you might not have housing costs, but you might still. Very individual, if you're continuing to rent or if you're not. And it is true that, for a large majority of people that are approaching retirement at the minute, their ambition will be to be mortgage free. So there's a big saving there. But one thing that I don't think people consider is they go, oh, well, I won't be paying the mortgage. I'm not going to be traveling to work. I won't use the car as much. So I'll be spending half the amount. But actually, you're on a 7-day weekend. Do you just want to sit in your house the whole time? Or do you want to, go and see the world for the first 10 to 15 years of your retirement and really live it up a bit? Because I think, people forget that point that their discretionary kind of leisure spending will likely ramp up significantly in those first few years. Also, spending across retirement will be lumpy. You'll have this front load where you spend a lot because you're seeing the world. Then there'll be a dip as you kind of just stay at home and don't spend as much. And then you'll rise up again as long-term care costs at the end. I think it's really hard to accurately sit there and go, this is exactly what I'm going to spend. And again, it's this moving target point. And I think what you need to do is just look at your budget today and go, okay, let's strip out the things that we know we're definitely not going to pay. But let's just let's not go at it with a chainsaw, Doge style, and think that we're not going to be spending all this money because there will be other areas that you are spending. The PLSA, again, provide their guidelines and they update them every year in line with inflation. And I think that is one place to start. I don't have definitive answers there. Again, it's all part of this moving target that is retirement planning. Stephen, will government-defined benefit pensions still exist by the time I retire? Wow. Okay, so they are very expensive. They seem to try to dilute down the value of them. I think I had someone recently say that they've been offered, an amount to come out of their defined scheme. It might have been a teacher, actually. So I don't know if everyone is still in defined benefit schemes or not. What I would say is the promise that's been made to people so far, as in the scheme that you're in, I imagine will exist. They might tweak the ages and things. Will new people going into the public sector get them? I'm uncertain. I think the schemes are so expensive to run that they're going to continually shift and evolve, and they're going to make them worse and worse from I go to the gym with a guy who worked in the NHS for decades, quite a senior level, and the amount of pension benefits he gets are a joke. He was promised them years ago, and he's the income he gets is silly. So I think that they will continue to shift, but I don't think they're just going to turn around to people that are already in the scheme and go, sorry, you don't get those anymore. Ray, can you compare InvestEngine and Interactive Investors SIPP? Rather than me doing that here, I'll link the broker tool below so that you can have a look and it will compare them in full HD for you. Missed. Dan, as a 37-year-old, should I be factoring in the state pension into my retirement planning? At the moment, I'm planning for the worst and working on the basis that it will not be a thing by the time I retire. Right, okay, so I think it makes a lot of sense to do that planning without it because, worst case scenario and all that kind of stuff. I always think there will be some form of state pension provision. I think the real value of that will have been diminished through cranking the age at which you can access it, and also by, not uplifting it with inflation, breaking the triple lock, all these kind of things. I think if I had to guess, I'd imagine what it'd go from is everyone receiving it at retirement age to this thing that kind of kicks in near the end of life for people over 80 that kind of helps them with care. I think anyone 45 and under should work on the assumption that it's not there, even though that's a crying shame because it's a massive part of current retirements. At every wealth cohort, apart from obviously the crazy rich, if you go say, the top 30% of earners, the middle and the bottom, state pension is the most important income. It's one of the largest parts of their income, even for quote unquote wealthy retirees. So it's going to, if they were to scrap it, there would need to be real provisions in terms of like, how are people going to replace that? Because as a couple, that's like 20 odd grand a year coming in guaranteed for life. That's a lot of money. So yeah, I think if you're 45 and under, it makes sense to work on the basis that it's not going to be there, because otherwise you might grossly undersave. Jack, should I keep my emergency fund in a normal easy access savings account or cash ISA, or perhaps another type of account I haven't considered? So Jack, things to consider with this are, first of all, you get a personal savings allowance. So depending on which tax band you're in, that allows you to earn up to £1,000 worth of tax-free interest on an annual basis if you're a 20% taxpayer, 500 if you're in the higher rate, and then if you're an additional rate taxpayer, you don't get anything. So depending on which tax band you're in, make sure you're using up that allowance first of all, that tax-free allowance in interest on an annual basis, before you're using up an ISA allowance, say. For a basic rate taxpayer, it's, even at 5%, £1,000 is quite a lot of interest. So, I personally want to protect my ISA allowance for the use of stocks and shares if I can. And that means then, I don't like using that personal savings allowance. I can do that. If you're an additional rate taxpayer and you don't get that, but you still want to save your ISA allowance, you could look at other sorts of accounts like premium bonds. Premium bonds are a lottery, and as such, the winnings are not interest. They're winnings, almost like gambling, because there's no guarantee that you win. If you can afford to stick 50 grand in though, and you're an additional rate taxpayer, the tax-free winnings are actually quite attractive. Premium bonds really are a tax-efficient place for people to park a lot of cash. They're not, a good investment if you don't earn very much money and you've not got much in there. So that could be a consideration. But the key thing with this is, and I think the message to have around emergency savings they are for emergencies. You should look to access them quickly in an emergency. And the point of this money is to not generate a return. It's not to make you rich. It's to protect your other assets and you from those emergencies. As such, let's remove the whole, how do I make as much money as possible out of this, and say, how does it suit me in a moment of crisis? For me personally, if I have access to the money at all times really easily, I'm likely to spend it in a moment of weakness. So I want to lock it away to a level, but still be able to access it. So that could be like premium bonds or whatever, or have it in a separate account that I then have to move it so it's not just there. And, with the premium bonds, because they take a few days to come to you, you would need like a credit card then to spend on and then pay it off. But yeah, I think a common problem that people, or a common thing I see with emergency funds, is people trying to maximize the rate of return they get on them, and not understanding that this is not a part of your portfolio that is designed for return. And the aim should be really just to outrun inflation so that you don't have to keep topping it up every few years. If you can get a return on that money above the rate of inflation, amazing. Kathy, I have a save as you earn scheme due to mature soon. Overall profit of around £7,000. This will take me over the £3,000 capital gains. I've seen I could potentially gift my husband £3,000. How do I do this? You contact the save as you earn provider before you make the sale, and you say, I want to transfer a portion of this to my husband or partner. And they'll either let you do it, or they might ask for him to set up an account. But yeah, that you need to do it before the point of sale so that you can benefit, so you can make that transfer. So yeah, contact them and do it that way. Joe asked, is it time to move cash out of money market funds? And if so, where is the best place to put them? Since the interest rates have dropped, the returns haven't been outperforming the interest rates offered on certain cash ISAs. I wonder what your plan is for short-term savings. So the main benefit of money market funds is they reflect the changes in the Bank of England base rate quickly. So as the rate is increasing, when interest rates were getting cranked, the money market funds were the quickest to react, which meant that you got much better rates much quicker there than you would with high street ISA providers or bank accounts or whatever. Now, the opposite is true in a sense. Well, the same is true, but the opposite impact. As interest rates come down, the money market funds reflect this really quickly. Some of the bank accounts out there might be slower. They are still going to come down. The majority of bank accounts, especially high street banks, are terrible. We have a comparison of cash ISAs that we keep up to date if you want to take a look at that. But yeah, for me, again, it's about making sure that, the money is there when I need it. and that I'm generating a return that's above the rate of inflation. I'm not trying to like squeeze every penny out of it. And I find a lot of people spend way too much time and effort just shifting around pots of cash, trying to get an extra 0.5% here or there. And like, I think they're better served focusing on their incomes or their investments or other parts of their portfolio life and earning potential that actually drive meaningful returns. So the money market funds, the rates are dropping quicker. I suspect that we will see the rates drop on the products that you're mentioning anyway. But yeah, I use a combination of money market funds, especially within my limited company, because I can hold those through the investment company side of things or park spare cash flow in those as well. I then have a bit of premium bonds. I have a cash ISA that's flexible with trading 2-on-2, and I can move the money between there and the stocks and shares ISA pretty easily. I will say that, I have my money spread around a lot of different places because it's my job to kind of have a view of all of these different structures and instruments. So I'm not saying that you should do that. And I just come back to that point again of just try and look to outrun inflation with your emergency savings and put them in a place that suits your personality style and how you would approach your finances in an emergency. Are you the kind of person that's going to spend them if they're sat in your bank account? Are you the kind of person that can't have a credit card? So you don't want that, so you need real easy access. That's how you should form the decision. And then you should also look at, can I be above the rate of inflation? Can I get a return of above 3%, say, on these funds? And then we're cooking with gas. Zoe, what are the simple ways to save on everyday expenses without feeling deprived? I think, I could sit here and go, switch energy suppliers and unscrew your light bulbs or some kind of thing like that. But there's plenty of channels that will do all of that kind of frugality stuff with you. I want to approach this in a slightly different way. I think the best way to go through life and to live a life where you don't feel deprived is to absolutely nail the things that are important to you in terms of expenditure, to not cut back on those and then to cut back on everything else. So I'll give you an example. I enjoy holidays. I enjoy going to the gym, and these are two areas that I will not compromise on. So at the minute, I go to a personal trainer about 4 or 5 times a week, and that costs a lot of money, right? But I drive a 2017 plate Mercedes A-Class that I own outright. It's full of dinks and holes. It's well over 100,000 miles, and I'm not replacing it because, a car to me is not that important. I think what ends up happening for a lot of people is they don't define what is truly important to me. What are the things that bring joy to my life? And they end up spending on things that really are not part of, those categories that are important to them. I think if everyone sat down and said, these are the things that I love to do on a week-to-week basis, that could be having a coffee. It could be walking the dog and going for a nice coffee on the way. Protect that expenditure and cherish it and relish it, or even, grow it. If you're the kind of person who loves a morning coffee, buy yourself a really nice bean to cup machine and one of those little stirrers and get into it and make it like a ritual in your life that you love. But then go, I'm not bothered about clothes or cars or even going on fancy holidays, so I don't spend money on those areas. I think feeling deprived in life is when you cut back on the things that you enjoy. So define what they are, spend and protect that spending in those areas, and then cut back on everything else. That's my 2p on the whole topic. So Miguel, me and my partner have a large debt burden. We have around £45,000 in unsecured loans. We have a mortgage with a fixed rate ending in June 2027, and we both have student loans. Combined, we earn around £58,000 a year. Recently, I've been thinking about doing an IVA to lower my monthly payments from £1,000 to something more manageable, like 200 to 300. If I had got my way, I would only need to repay about £15,000 of my debts and have more time to do it. Okay, so I have some experience here because I used to advise people on IVAs. So an IVA is a form of insolvency, but rather than it being, say, bankruptcy, where the majority or all of the debt is wiped in the main, broad stroke, it's not always the case, but just to help people understand, an IVA, you're typically in an agreement where you pay a monthly amount, and then at the end of that period, the debt is wiped. It's often described that IVAs are not as bad as bankruptcy because you're paying back some of the debt. It is a form of insolvency. Most creditors, lenders, whatever, will look at it and go, you've basically been bankrupt. So really take that into consideration. Don't let salesmen out there convince you that it's an easy way out of your debt. It's not easy. They will look at all aspects of your life. They will trawl through your bank statements. You have an insolvency practitioner who oversees you. And unfortunately, many people fail the IVA in the third year and whatever, and they just end up right back where they started, and all of the money that they paid, that disappears. So because what people don't realise is a lot of the money they pay into the IVA is sucked up in fees and not actually paying the debt. So yeah, this is why people try and sell them to you, because they make loads in fees. What I would say is any form of insolvency needs to be taken really seriously before you jump into it. You have a house. Do you have equity in the house? They can't force you to sell the house, but they might ask you to take out a loan against it. And if they can't get a loan against the house, they might ask you to extend the IVA. So you're in it for much longer than you thought you would be. Yeah, I would say just get some really good quality free advice here. I'll leave some debt charities below for you in the description that you can go over that will tell you, is that kind of solution right for you or not? Be careful of speaking to slick salesmen who are trying to sell you on a product that makes them thousands of pounds in fees. Yeah, insolvency is never an easy way out. Sometimes it's the right way out for certain people, but it shouldn't be seen as like I can get away with not paying my debts here. I hope you figure out your situation, and like I say, speak to the debt charities below. This is the second half of that question, actually. I don't know why, but they say, how impactful are they on credit scores and mortgage accessibility? I mean, they're absolutely devastating to credit scores because they're a form of insolvency. And I mean, I'm sure there's examples of mortgage lenders who would lend to you, but they're going to go, while you're in the IVA, I don't think you're going to get a mortgage. Post IVA, the impact will last for 6 years on your credit file from the point that you start it. But post IVA, many mortgage lenders will ask you for the rest of your life, have you ever performed any form of insolvency? Have you been bankrupt, done an IRA? Have you been bankrupt, done an IVA, a debt relief order, or a trust deed, which is like a Scottish version? And you have to answer yes to that, even if it's been 20 years, because then it would be a form of mortgage fraud if you were to lie, So a lot of the time, because they can't see it on your credit file anymore, they're asking you the question because they just want to know. So yeah, really think about it, mate, and make sure you get that free advice. So Alex, we're almost financially free from a mortgage. How do I process the feeling? I've always lived with debt and always dreamed about not being tied down to it. But now that I'm close to freedom, how do I move on? It would be the first time that I'm not forced by circumstance to be financially responsible. And in a way, having a mortgage kept me in check. I'm afraid of what happens next. I've never had a period in my life when my bank account will be empty by the end of the month. Congratulations, Alex. Wonderful achievement. No, I'm not having that. Get them out. Wonderful achievement. Pat yourself on the back, all of that stuff. Okay, first of all, so I still, as I am now, run my finances so that by the time I'm paid, there's nothing left in my bank account. It's just kind of like how I like to run things. I like everything to have a home. I allocate it. I fire off all my savings on the first day. If I give myself $1,000 a month to spend on myself, or 10 grand, I'm just going to find a way to run through it, I find. So, I'll have my set budget and that's it. I'm right there with you on that. And maybe you might structure your finances in a similar way. If we're talking now about what next, there's going to be a moment at some point over the next 30 days or whenever you get paid where there's an amount of money that lands in your bank account and it's just not going to disappear. And that is the mortgage payment. I personally think, not advice, but this is what I think you should do. I think you should take that money and I think you should blow it. I think you should go and live your life a little, go out for a really nice meal or whatever with some loved ones, pay for it and be like, I've done that. That is the representation of all my hard work to the point now where I can just enjoy that little bit more freedom And, this is reflective of the fact that I can spend this money without any guilt and just enjoy it and try and internalize that. Then going forwards, I think, you're a person that, by the sounds of it, copes well with the structure and rigidity of finances. You allude to the fact that the mortgage kept you on the straight and narrow. So why don't you set up a rule? I don't know what your wider financial circumstances are like and if you have adequate retirement, pension, savings and emergency funds and stuff. So, you need to look at that and go, do I need to save here? But maybe you go, the money that lands in my bank account now every month that's extra, this mortgage payment, 50% of it I'm going to save and 50% of it I'm going to spend. So then going forward, you're thinking, well, I'm still doing, I'm still growing my wealth, but I'm also improving my quality of life. This is the kind of rule that I have in place with my finances for any money that comes in unexpected. 50% I save, 50% I try and spend, just so that I actually live my life a little bit. Tamain, my co-host on the podcast, taught me about all of that kind of stuff. So Nathaniel, a person has 10K working part-time. They want to start investing and save an emergency fund. Where should someone put their emergency fund and how much should they invest? All right, Nathaniel, sounds like you're getting off to a great start there. So you're earning about 800 and something pound a month, I would say. You probably won't pay tax, I assume, because you're under the 12 odd grand threshold. Many people will sit here and go, you need 3 to 6 months worth of living costs, but this is going to take a long time to save up. I think a really good place, a target for you to start with is just to build up 1 month's worth of income in an emergency fund. You want to grow it beyond there, ideally long term, but about 800 odd quid will just give you a lot of flexibility. Have it in an easy access savings account or wherever you feel comfortable, somewhere that generates a return that's just above the rate of inflation at least, so that your money isn't losing its purchasing power over time. And I think that's a great place to start. And then in terms of investing, how much should you invest? How long's a piece of string? I think what you need to do is you need to sit down and go, where do I want to be at retirement? Use a retirement calculator or something like that and work backwards from there. But as a starting point, let's just say you took away a little bit every month into an investment account, £10 a month, £20 a month, 30, 40, 50, whatever you think you can afford. It's better than nothing. And just let that build over the years. And then each year sit down and go, am I earning more money or am I in a position where I can just push that up by 1 or 2%? And over the course of a lifetime, that will do great things. Okay, Glenn. Should my partner and I overpay our mortgage or should we contribute more towards our pensions, workplace and stocks and shares investments? We're 25 years old and have just purchased a house. We already maximise our employer pension contributions and above. It continues. I should also say that we live in Scotland, so our tax bands are more aggressive and I would expect that in 1 to 3 years, both of us will be paying the higher rate of tax. Oh, interesting bit of detail, Glenn. We like it. There's 2 pieces of paper as well for the counter. Okay, so the way for you to navigate around the fact that you enter the higher rate tax bands is if you contribute more into your pensions, especially if you say like a salary sacrifice or whatever, you can lower, your gross pay or you can get the rebate back. So that's a big factor in that. If you enter into a higher rate tax band and you can pay that money into your pension, you're going to get that higher rate tax relief. In terms of overpaying your mortgage or investing more, it's like a age-old question made all the harder recently to answer by the fact that interest rates are now higher than they were. So when interest rates were like 1%, 2% on mortgages and investment returns were expected to be, say, around 9% average a year, it didn't make all that much sense to overpay the mortgage from a numbers perspective because you're only generating a 1% or 2% return over here, potentially 9% over there. Now, those numbers are much closer together. A mortgage could be 4 or 5%. Expected market returns long term might be 9%, but over the next 10 years, the chatter is that the returns on the market might be slightly lower. I think this comes down to then for, how I would approach this. I think there's a certain type of person who gets a real kick out of overpaying their mortgage and gets a real kick out of this idea that they're going to get rid of that mortgage sooner. Go for it. Also, as well, the return that you get on paying the mortgage is certain, as in if you overpay the mortgage, the amount that you save, you know exactly what that figure is. If you overpay if you invest more in the stock market, there's an uncertainty there to the returns. But if you're investing in, say, a stocks and shares ISA and you're generating a return through the market, that money, you can access that at any point, and you can access that money to pay down the mortgage. If you slam more money into your mortgage, to access that again, you have to, refinance, reborrow, extract, or whatever. You lack a bit of flexibility there. For me personally, I'm never overpaying my mortgage, really, over investing, because investing to me should generate a better return long term, plus gives me flexibility and choice over how I distribute those assets if it's in, say, a stocks and shares ISA structure. So that's the way I think about it. Okay, Jude. With house prices skyrocketing across the UK, is it wise to continue to save money into a lifetime ISA for the purpose of buying my first home? The 450k limit is not really sufficient to buy a property in London, and with the way things are looking, I'm minded to withdraw the money and take the 6.25% hit and reinvest it elsewhere. Okay, Jude, what I would say first of all is let's wait for the spring budget. It's not long away now, and let's see what Labour do there with lifetime ISAs. It would be such an easy win for them just to jack that up a bit or to remove the penalty. So, yeah. But you are right in the sense of if you're living in an area where 450k doesn't buy you much of a house, that the lifetime ISA becomes a bit of a trap. So, yeah, I would just say let's just wait for the next budget and see kind of what happens there. Next one, James. Please, can you analyse the pros and cons of investing in buy-to-let property versus index funds? Okay, so property, one of the main drawbacks of property is how expensive it is. The fees they charge you are a joke. There's just fees for everything. Valuation fees, solicitors' fees, and then the solicitor will do the searches fees. And the mortgage provider wants you to do this search, and you've got to pay for their solicitor. It's just a joke, right? Arrangement fees, blah, 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 blah. To buy a £150,000 property with a £37,000 deposit down, you're looking at near 50k in total just to do the thing. But anyway, the fees are a joke. You don't get those kind of fees with index investing. And the process for investing in an index is so much easier. If I gave you 50 million quid now and you wanted to buy 50 million quid's worth of index funds, you could do it by the end of the day. For property, it's going to take you months, potentially years to deploy all that money, unless you buy a big shiny office block. But, if you're buying terraced houses or whatever. The main benefit of property, and the only reason I would consider it in my portfolio, is the ability to use relatively stable, relatively cheap leverage. And what I mean by that is buy-to-let mortgages. So leverage within equities exists. It's a bit more risky because of the margin calls and things like this, and how the volatility within equities is a lot more visible and live than the volatility within property. As in, we know stock prices all of the time. The housing market, no one stood outside your house every day shouting the price of your house at you. So if I buy a property, I know these numbers aren't realistic, but let's just give an example. If I buy a property for 100 grand and I put 25 grand down to buy it, I then get the other £75,000 worth from a mortgage provider, and that property goes up by 10% in value. My £25,000 has gone to £35,000 because I get to keep that full 10k, even though I didn't put down all of the money. So there's that leverage component. Leverage can work the other way against you as well, in the sense of if the property prices drop, you get stung the other way. But it's that element of leverage in the portfolio, to me, that makes property attractive. It adds a new dynamic to the portfolio in that sense. But if you're comparing just a property versus just equities without the debt, I would say equities or index funds wins every time, because just how much cheaper and more passive, I hate the word passive, but much easier to manage, administer, whatever, than a property portfolio where you're getting constant issues, repairs, maintenance, all of that stuff. Hope that answers the question. This video is going to be like 10 hours long, I swear. We've still got a few to do. Zach, are buy-to-let properties even worth it these days? I'm not sure I could be bothered managing another property and dealing with tenants. However, people I've grown up around who have got lots of money got it from investing in property. So it just feels like the right thing to do. I'd have to pull the deposit, probably around 35k, out of my ISAs. I'm unsure if it makes sense to do this, as I would lose the tax benefits. So what got people rich in the past isn't always guaranteed to get you rich today. There was a time when a man got rich off a wind-up radio. It's not going to happen today, okay? I think looking at the previous generations and going, well, they all got rich from property, I think that's a bad way to view these things. I think that people get rich long-term from buying assets that they then hold for the long term. And I think today, if you bought a load of property and you held it for 20 to 30 years, you would probably do okay. Add in the mortgage leverage component, you might even do a little bit better. But the hassle is higher, and the tax structure and the political narrative around landlords is hostile. They are definitely squeezing individual landlords out. And I think personally, if you want to approach property at all, you need to view it as quite a professional outfit. You need to think of yourself as a professional outfit. You need to be thinking, I'm going to buy a few of these, probably within a limited company structure, and I'm going to run it like a business. I think the days of accidental landlords, a couple meeting up and both owning a flat and keeping hold of one of the flats when they buy a house, I think those days are probably gone. And yeah, I would be asking yourself, like, do I really want to get 4 or 5 properties and go through all of that? Or was I just looking to buy one and pull it out of my ISA? The thing I would say is, though, just don't listen to people that are 30, 40 years older than you saying, well, the only way to make real money in this country is through property. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But have they got any experience in the equity market? Do they know what stocks and shares have done over the same time period? Are they only talking about property because it's the only way that they got rich? Because I can tell you now, over the last 30 years, plenty of people made plenty of money in the stock market as well. Right, okay. Christian, what is your view of the current housing market in the UK? Would you rent or buy in the current climate? Commenting on the state of the housing market, mate, is a really big thing. And I think what we can say is that the housing market serves a lot of people pretty badly at the minute. And for anyone who's looking to enter into the market and buy, it's a hard place to be. So let's just answer the question about renting versus buying. You buy a property because you want to live there. I'm talking about a home at the minute, right? And what I think we need to do as a country is separate home ownership from property investment. And people need to stop thinking about the house that they live in as their biggest investment. It's not. Your biggest asset, really, your biggest investment will be your pension. Your house works in tandem with that to provide you shelter. So you have shelter that is you've paid off, that you own. You own the cave. No one's taking your cave off you, so it doesn't cost you money. And then your pension and retirement savings, they pay for your life day to day. That's how we should view it, right? So when you view a home as a home and not as an investment, that reframes the decision around should I buy or should I not? Should you buy? Well, do you like where you live? Are you going to be there for a long time? Do you want to put down your roots, and does the house look nice to you? Is it somewhere that you could see yourself live in, and can you afford to pay the mortgage and the bills and all of those things and the maintenance? Answer those questions. Should you rent? Is it that you're in a place that you don't really love, that you're just kind of there for work and that you don't see yourself there long term? Is it, could you afford maintenance and repairs on the place? It's the same questions in reverse. You buy if you're going to be in a place for a long time and you want to call it home. You rent if you want flexibility and over where you go to and all of those kind of things. Let's remove this whole, what is the most financially sensible thing to do? Because, people say all the time, renting's dead money. Don't consider the fact that if you buy a property and then leave it within a couple of years, that you'll have spent a load of money on stuff like fees on solicitors and all of this kind of stuff that you didn't need to spend as well. So yeah, let's start treating homes like homes, not like some weird pseudo investment. Ian says, I have a 2% fixed term mortgage back from the good old days of stupidly low interest rates. As this is technically below inflation at the moment, does that mean even with interest adding on, I'm technically gaining wealth from this? Yes, it does. Because if inflation is 3%, your mortgage is 2%, you gain that 1% because, the value of the debt. Inflation is good for people with debt because it kind of erodes the real terms value of the debt. So yeah, to have a mortgage interest rate that's below the rate of inflation, what a thing. Joe, I've just bought my first flat. I got some help from my parents. They gifted me £15,000, brackets interest free, that I'm paying back £200 a month alongside my mortgage. Should I keep paying them off early with bonuses and then use the £200 a month towards paying my mortgage? I already invest 15% of my pay into an ISA. You sound like you're doing great, mate. Well done on your parents for helping you out as well. Absolute legends. I hope you appreciate them. Now let's, now that we've said that, don't show them the next bit. If you want to pay back your parents because you feel like it's the decent thing to do, go for it. You know, if they need the money and you can afford to do it, go for it. But from a financial decision perspective, if they're offering you an interest-free loan with no strings attached and they're saying you just pay it back at £200 a month, don't be in a rush to pay that back. It's the cheapest money you'll ever get. So yeah. Seb, the story we're always sold is that you are better off in the long run going into higher education. However, is this necessarily true, particularly with regards to your pension? For example, from starting university to finishing my PhD took around 11 years. During this time, I had no income and therefore no pension, so only started contributing at the age of 29. Is there a sweet spot at which you should be able to optimise time commitment versus salary to maximise a pension value at the age of, say, 65? I mean, like, the sooner you start saving into that pension, right, the better. And I think a lot of people have woken up to the fact that, like, higher education, the value in that might not be as clear as it was in the past. I think the problem was for our previous generation, my parents, if you went to uni, you were guaranteed a good job. I think now so many people have been to uni that the university education doesn't hold as much weight as it did. I do think that the studies, though, show that if you get a higher education, you're likely to earn more over your career. But yeah, yours is quite a different set of circumstances because you went PhD level, so you were studying for a long time, right? If I had my time again, would I do uni again? I loved it from a social perspective, but I think I probably could have had a better time just going traveling for 3 years or whatever. It might have even been cheaper. And nowadays it's so expensive as well. I was having this conversation with my son the other day where I was saying to him, why don't you consider an apprenticeship as well beyond, he's only young, but he's like, should I go to uni? And I was like, well, these apprenticeship things exist and they're also good. Who knows? Case by case, course dependent and the quality of the university dependent. If you go into an Oxford or a Cambridge, or you've got a very clear route to a career off the back of the degree you're doing, you need the degree, engineering or something, then yeah, go for it. If you're going to just do one of the ologies at a university that isn't even in the top 300 in the UK or whatever, then the jury's out on whether you should just go get a job and get stuck in. My question is regarding my 18-year-old son. I'd love to get him more involved in his finances, something I took far too long to do. He's still in full-time education but has a part-time job. He's very careless with money. I came into some money recently and gave him a cash amount on the proviso that £1,000 was going to be used to be set up as SIPP, which he did. I'd love to get him to add more to this from his monthly wage, even if it's just £5 a month, so he can see the benefit of compounding. How can I get him to do this? Tough question, that one. Because if he doesn't want to listen, he's not going to listen. The problem with 18-year-olds is, I was one once, you kind of think like you know it all and that people above you couldn't possibly relate to your life experience or circumstances because everything's different now to how it was for you. Peter Jones, who is on Dragon's Den, I remember seeing him speak about how he was going to distribute wealth to his children. And he said that he would work on a system whereby he would double anything that they earn from their job to incentivize them to earn more. Or if they worked in a career or profession that he thought were, benefiting the human race, like a nurse or something, he would multiply it by a factor of 5 or whatever. Maybe you could say to your son, every £5 you put in your SIPP, I'll match it or whatever to kind of really incentivize him to do that. I think sticking £1,000 in at 18 is a great start though. And one day he will wake up to the realities of investing. And even that at that age will have done wonders for him. So it sounds like you're doing a great job, mate. Kate, how would you educate the younger generations in financial literacy so they can enter adulthood financially informed and so they don't make the stupid decisions that I did? Great question. Talk to them about money. Talk to them about budgeting and these kind of points, and give them some control and freedom to make mistakes. From what I've seen online and through studies, we need to allow children to fail financially at a young age and to feel the disappointment so that they don't repeat that at a later age. It depends on how old your kids are, obviously, but give them a budget for the day, let them go blow it all on crap in the first 5 minutes, and then all the rest of the day, it's like, well, you spent your money, so they can learn from that. And then, talk to them about money in a way that's not patronizing. Go around the supermarket with them, and when you're going around, show them the different values of prices of beans and why you're picking the one that you are, and like the trade-off between quality and price and these decisions, and how in certain areas it's like, well, we really love the beans, so we get the best beans, but we're not too keen on bagels, so we get the cheaper bagels. I don't know, like, have those conversations and don't be scared to talk to them about money. They're a lot smarter than people give them credit, kids. They know what's going on. You just got to have a chat to them about it. And then broadly for me, in terms of how am I going to try and help? Because one of my goals is to try and improve financial literacy and education in the UK. I've been thinking about this more and more recently. And I think where I want to get to is I would like to set up a trust or a charity where I put a chunk of money in. And to frame this, is this thing called the National Wealth Fund, the National Fund. And in the 1920s or 30s, at the time, an anonymous donor, who they now know who it is, they found out in 2020, donated £500,000 to a charity under the provision that it could only be accessed, that money, if it was to clear the national debt. And the money, it had to be more than the national debt to pay it off. It never reached the point where it's been big enough to clear the national debt, because the national debt's just gone like this. But that £500,000 now is worth something like 500 million quid, or maybe even more. It's worth a lot of money. 600 million or something. They're actually applied for a High Court ruling to try and access the funds just so they can piss them into the wind, throwing them at the bottomless pit that is our national debt. But anyway, it kind of inspired me to think maybe I could set up a trust or fund, park a chunk of cash in there, and say that this money can only be used for the purpose of financial education, that it will administer 2 to 3% of its holdings on an annual basis, and that money can then be spent educating kids, and we can compound that throughout the years. And, in year one, it might only be enough to hire someone part-time to go and do workshops at schools in deprived areas or whatever. But maybe in 50 years or 100 years, it's so big that it can lobby the government, it can roll out education programs across the whole of the UK. Who knows? I think I like that legacy component to it, and the fact that is a way for it to live on beyond me. Because I could start speaking at schools and stuff, but then when I get too old to do that, does it just die there? I would like something that kind of sits there for all to see as a commitment to education for children and young adults for generations to come. And that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. A lot of things to work out and how that would work. And I'm going to need to earn a bit of money first before I do it, because, I'd probably need to stick a good chunk of cash in. He stuck £500,000 in like the 30s or whatever. So that was some serious money back then. I don't have that kind of money, unfortunately, but I would like to get it off to a good start. But yeah, I think about that and more on that in the years to come. So Darren, I've been thinking a lot about a junior SIPP and how underutilised it is. At the same time, the junior ISA has its risks, as there's always a concern that a child might squander the money once they gain access. What are your thoughts on scrapping the junior SIPP and introducing a junior LISA instead? I like the idea of introducing a junior LISA, especially if it's only for the purposes of buying a home. Then it means that they can't access the money unless it's for buying a house. Or when the junior ISA is set up, maybe the parent could say the child can access it for this, this, or this, but it probably won't happen. So yeah. Letitia said, do you have any strategies for planning how to juggle retirement contributions, childcare and parental care expenses? My partner and I have a 2-year-old, and at the same time, our parents are about to enter an age where they need additional support. So you've got to do what you've got to do, Letitia. You can't skirt your responsibilities. And like I said before, watch that video where I show how it's very possible to build a good retirement with a lumpy savings. And at certain points in your life, you might just need to step back from your ability to save aggressively for your futures. What I would say is just try and hold on to those pension contributions at work, and just do what you can there. Try and stay in those schemes. Keep that ticking in the background. because most of the time people don't even miss that money. But yeah, if you've got other family commitments that you need to step up for, you know, it's okay to say like, this has to take a priority at this point in my life. Lev, am I able to open a SIPP as well as a junior ISA? And if so, is it possible to invest in the same financial year if I've already invested 9K into the JISA? So junior SIPP and junior ISA. Yes, you can have one of each and you can pay into the junior SIPP in the same year. Phil, it was mentioned in a video last year that life critical illness insurance is actually quite high in the budget order of operations. While everything else is extensively covered in the channel, I'm left with many questions on this particular subject. It would be nice to know more about this, or at least pointed to some respectable sources in this area. I've always put off making a video about insurance because I was kind of worried that it would make me feel like I'm an insurance salesman. Whenever I talk about insurance, people always push back on it. And I didn't want to kind of, force that down people's throats. If you feel like a video based on insurance would be useful, where I outline, these are the different types, this is how you use them, and this is what you should look for when you're shopping around. And I'm talking life, critical illness, these kind of things. Let me know, leave a little bank emoji in the comments or something. And if I think there's quite a lot of them, I'll make that video. Ray, how can you reach financial freedom? And is it possible while living in the UK or Western world? Yeah, you reach financial freedom at the point that your assets are kicking off enough in terms of reliable passive income, again, that word passive, I hate it, so that you don't have to work anymore. So that your assets kick off enough so that you stop trading your time for money. That's financial freedom. If you do that beyond the age of 65, it's called retirement. If you do it before, it's called, financial freedom. It's very much possible. It's probably harder today than it was at certain points. But at the same time, it's also easier in the sense that people can buy assets like the global stock market much easier than they ever could before. Sonny, what do I need to know while starting a dropshipping business for merchandise and swag? What I want to know, Sonny, is why are you starting a dropshipping business for merchandise and swag? What merchandise and swag are you selling? Whose merchandise and swag? The people who do best selling merchandise or merch are people with big audiences. I'm wearing a liquidity hoodie jumper here. That's an Instagram finance page. I like buying merch from other finance channels. So liquidity, they have a huge audience on Instagram, so they find it easy to sell merch. Just be careful if you're buying into some dropshipping course from some finance pro telling you that it's a way to make loads of money, mate. In my experience, it's quite hard to make money out of dropshipping, especially nowadays, because people demand next day delivery and things. And a lot of dropshipping, the lead times between when you order and when you get it are quite long. I'm sure loads of people make loads of money out of it. But yeah, just be careful who you're listening to there. I don't know enough about it to say what you should or shouldn't be doing. Heidi, a little while ago, there was a link to some of your YouTube videos about finding a financial advisor, but I can't find it any longer. I really need some advice on my pension. I'll link them below for you, Heidi, so that you can find those links on how to speak to some good quality financial advisors. Kieran, as a young person just getting control of my financial accounts, 16 to 20, what are the 5 main things I should be doing right now? 5 specific, what happens if there's 6 or maybe 4? You're between 16 and 20, so it very much varies. All I'm going to say to you is build up a solid emergency fund so when life swings at you, you can take the punch. Start investing in some tax efficient accounts. If you're below the age of 18, ask your parents to open you a junior SIPP and a junior ISA and start putting some money into those. Spend less than you earn and invest and save the rest. Focus on skills. Go out there in life and, try and invest in your education, your skills, so that you can improve your earning potential. Try lots of things until you find the thing you like. Don't be scared to quit stuff. We have this attitude in life of, quitting is for failures or whatever. You've got to stick it out. You shouldn't quit. I think that's bad advice for someone in their 20s. What I would say to someone early in their life is try things. If you don't like it, get the hell out of there and try something else until you find the thing you like. I think that was 5, maybe not. Craig, how are your conversations with your partner about money, budgets, and discussions on short or long-term plans? And what challenges have you found with finding common goals and even common language when talking about money? So, my partner hates talking about money. I am literally Damien talks money. So you can only imagine. I find it therapeutic to talk about cash. She finds it, makes her anxious. So it's not the easiest thing in the world. We don't have that all figured out. I find, the language of children and talking about kids and things like that is the best way to come at the topic, to bring her on side in terms of wanting to openly discuss about finances and have those conversations. Simon, have you thought about producing some of your guidance for countries outside of the UK? I have, and when I first started the channel, the common logic from bigger channels around me were you need to speak in dollars because you need to appeal to a global audience so that, you can take over the world and all this kind of stuff. And I always thought, well, it's much easier for me just to talk about the UK because I understand it. And I actually think that it's far more valuable for me and for you if I speak about the UK and the UK market because I understand the products, and then you get content that is specific and nuanced to the UK market. And the issue is the people who speak in dollars and quite broad and try and appeal to everyone from, Indiana to India, you end up with this kind of like woolly, fluffy finance content that often is a lot of mindset stuff, which I like that as well, but it's not, like the details that you want. So while I really appreciate and respect and love my international audience, and I really try and make sure that my content has stuff in it for everyone, and I'll make videos that aren't just like the UK market, I really think that like the best thing that I can do as a creator is focus on the UK because the need here is so great. There's lots of people here, and I am from the UK, so I understand it more. Yeah, so I'm never going to, from a personal finance content perspective, where we're talking about like the how-tos, it's always going to have that UK lean. Maybe down the line in 5-10 years, I'm making documentaries and one of my other brands has taken over as the personal finance kind of how-tos and index funds and ISAs and all of that stuff. And maybe then I'm looking more globally, who knows? But there's a Jimmy Iovine quote, the guy who was behind Dr. Dre and is it Interscope? I think it's Interscope Records. Jimmy Iovine. He said, "You don't shoot the horse you rode in on." And I rode in on the UK horse. I'm not about to go, well, I want to take over the world and let's leave that market behind. I'm from the UK. I know the UK. I'm not fucking leaving. Matt, what are your thoughts on the FIRE movement? The FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early, gets a lot of flack because it can be a bit like extremist, I like it in the sense of it gets people in the game, it gets people thinking about it, and it gets people excited about investing and saving, and not many things do that. I don't like some of the extreme frugality. I think that is quite restrictive, and I think some people love extreme frugality. I think other people are led to it by desperation, and the conversation should be more about improving incomes. But that's each to their own. If you're into I know some people just love couponing and all of that. The other thing I really don't like about it is the commercial angle to FIRE. The amount of people who have fired financial independence, retire early, when the reality is they make all of their money by talking about FIRE, by selling products, books, courses around FIRE to other people on how they can FIRE early. And the truth is that, you want to FIRE really early at the age of 30, write a blog or make a YouTube channel about how you fired in your early 20s and sell products. So yeah, I don't like that side of it personally. You might then say, well, Damien, you're a hypocrite. You sit here and talk about investing, but hopefully, you see that I don't sell any courses or anything like this. I give them away. We have a free index investing for beginners course. I'll link it below. But yeah, I don't like this whole thing of you can retire early if you save loads of money, but buy my course and I'll show you how to save that money. You just don't buy the course. Mark, can you comment on the proportion of taxpayer money being spent? I was alarmed that the national debt is as high as 4th on the list of what my tax goes on. That and pensions, both really scary. The state pension, I'm in favour of moving away from the state pension as we are and really rethinking it, it would take a lot of long-term thinking. It's not today that we should talk about it, but instead of giving everyone a state pension, put $5,000 in a pot for kids at the time they're born and let that compound until they're 18, at which point it turns into a SIPP that they carry around for life. Wherever they work for an employer, there's an auto-enrollment where they pay in and the employer matches. That initial 18-year period of compounding from that 5K from 0 to 18 will do so much heavy lifting. And over the course of a whole career, they would end up with millions. And I think that then over, say, 60 to 70 years, we could just fade out the state pension and replace 100 billion a year and growing with, say, I think it'd be about 3 billion a year for the 500,000 kids that are born a year in the UK. We would need some kind of pension allocation for people that move here. You know, people who move here and work here their whole lives shouldn't be told you can't have a pension. So there should be some kind of state pension scheme. There would be details to work out, but it would be much smaller. And we would, like I said, within a couple of generations, we would reduce this ever-growing, ever-colossal bill. And yeah, there's a few ways that I would look at spending and try and address them. The main reason the national debt has gone up so much is because interest rates have gone up. You know, the cost of servicing that debt has increased. Denise, how can women navigate investing and motherhood? I've only just started investing in January this year, and I'm honestly terrified how the advent of motherhood will negatively impact my investment journey and subsequently my retirement pot. So the motherhood gap or penalty, which there'll be people in the comments rolling their eyes, but it's there, it's true, and it's just simply, it's not like a gender pay gap in such, it's more that just women tend to leave the workplace to look after their kids, which is something that both the woman tends to want to do and the man accepts. We don't really live in this society where we've normalized the man performing the motherly role, if that makes sense. So what we have is, in general, I'm generalizing of course, a lot of women step out of the workforce when they have a child and they don't earn any money throughout that period, or their earnings significantly drop. When they re-enter the workforce, that's like a trough in their savings. How we figure that out from a system-wide perspective, big question. But from between couples, what I would say is have a conversation with your partner, assuming you've got a partner, and say to them, it is potentially more tax efficient for us in later life to have 2 pots of 500,000 than 1 pot of 1 million with you. So there should be an allocation there within the household budget to make sure that your investment savings continue to grow and be contributed to. Laura, is buying a car on PCP a bad idea? I hear people say they're great if you want to change cars regularly, but it feels like that might be part of the trap. Yeah, so the PCP thing, I'm not a car expert, but my hot take on this, it's probably not even that hot a take, my take is the car finance industry realised they weren't selling as many cars and thought, how can we get more cars off the lot here cheaper? So they invented PCP, whereby you essentially lease the car, and at the end you have this big balloon payment, and if you don't pay the balloon payment, you have to give the car back. And then you can get another car and pay a monthly payment on a lease. It's essentially leasing a car with a HP finance bit at the end. And I think not people will go around going, oh yeah, this is my car, but it's on a PCP finance arrangement. You're essentially renting it until you clear that balloon. I think a lot of people just are happy to sit with car finance for life. And if that's their bag, then go for it. But, I think a lot of people, if they just stopped trying to drive around in nice cars and said, let's just pay that money into index funds and invest instead, they would be in much better financial positions later in life. Sadie put, what's the best piece of financial advice you've ever received? There's so many bits of financial advice, but one that I come back to is everyone at some point in their life will have some opportunity that comes in front of them where they might have the ability to make a good amount of money. And it's until that opportunity presents itself, the best thing that you can do is just to save and invest so that when it comes in front of you, you're ready. The amount of people who don't take action because they're not financially robust enough to be able to make the leap at that point. I earn more money now than I ever had before because when it came down to the decision to quit my full-time job, to make videos in my spare room, I had savings and investments in the background. So if you're sat there at home and you're yearning for something in life and you're thinking, I want something that's my own, or I want to try something new, but I'm not sure what that is. Park that for now and just get investing and saving and building up a base of assets that are flexible, stocks and shares ISA, fund your pension well, have an emergency fund. Because I find that when you have that, like, opportunities kind of present themselves, and then when the thing does come in front of you, you're there, your eyes are open to it, you're looking for it, and you're ready to pounce. Anna, what's the best book you've ever read about money? God, I always say that The Richest Man in Babylon was the book that got me into personal finance. It's a really cutesy little story. And I think if you're looking for something that is just a nice read and you're looking to be really inspired about the basics of personal finance, that's it. The Almanac of Naval Ravikant was a book that I read in the last few years, which I think explains this next stages of money, like wealth generation, the modern world, leverage, and how that features in, and content, and these kind of things. I think that's a really good book, The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. And then Who Moved My Cheese is a good book if you're in a position where you're in life and you want to make a leap and make a change, but you're a bit scared. Got my throat. Amara, what should I consider when starting a side hustle or freelance work to supplement my income? Okay, when it comes to side hustles, the way I'm probably thinking about this, maybe how I would split it down, is how much money you want to make, how much time have you got, how much risk are you willing to take? If you just want to make a couple of £100 a month, you don't really want to take any risk, and you've not got time to put into it in a big way, you've got a few hours a week, just go deliver takeaways. I used to deliver takeaways for a Chinese restaurant, and that was a side hustle. Not everything has to be, scale it to the moon, get funding, all of this, replace your main job. A side hustle can just be something to bring in a few £100 a month if you've got the time. If you're more inclined, and you're saying, I want this to become a bigger thing, just understand that the majority of things that people say people make money out of that other people call a scam are legitimate. You can make money out of being a YouTuber, you can make money out of probably dropshipping or FBA, or pick any of the other classic side hustles. But it's a lot of hard work and it takes a lot of time. The average YouTuber, takes years before they get any meaningful audience. I was very lucky. I got one quite quickly, but I'm by no means normal. And I don't know if I would have stuck around if I had to do it for 2 to 3 years. So yeah, just have that conversation with yourself and understand that if you're going to do something like a YouTube channel, the payoff isn't quick at all. It can take quite a while. I think, one side hustle can lead to the next as well. So I did the delivering takeaways, and whilst I was delivering takeaways, because it allowed my head just to rest, from doing my day job, I thought about doing a YouTube channel. I conceived it. I listened to lots of audiobooks and other channels on how to start a YouTube channel. And that's kind of where I conceived everything and thought of my first video ideas and thumbnail and title strategies and things like this. I had quite a solid plan coming into it, which I think fed into the success. So, one side hustle can lead to another. But yeah, I don't have much advice apart from side hustle gets glamorized almost as easy cash, but it's going to require either investment, time, or a bit of risk, or all three. And I think, it's not necessarily that easy. And I would also ask you, is it more effective for you to try and get more money out of your main hustle than starting up a side hustle? Could you get a promotion at work? Could you just ask for a pay rise? Could you work a few extra hours? Can you get more out of that before you try something new? Spend 4 hours a week delivering takeaways to earn, £10 an hour, or you could just ask for a pay rise at work and do less work. Nia, I'm looking at getting life insurance. Why are some policies so much cheaper than others? I think it all comes down to, Nia, just the quality of the policy. And I think it's a bit like car insurance and stuff as well. When you see all of the quotes lined up on a comparison site, the ones that are really expensive are basically saying, we don't want you as a customer. So we're just going to set the price so high, see if you pay it or not. I think though, quality of the product, one issue that I found when I'm looking for life insurance was if you use the comparison sites, the temptation is to just go for the cheapest product out there, whereas that might not be the best thing to do. It's why I eventually used a broker. I'll link the ones below that I've used, and a conversation with someone who is a broker on the podcast if you want to check that out. But yeah, I think quality of the product and making sure that it actually fits you and that it's going to work, because the last thing you want is to die and they go, oh, well, your family don't get that life insurance because you cheaped out by £2 a month and that was the difference between you getting it and not because of this weird little clause right here. Ling, what advice do you have for building wealth on a modest income? I see other people talk about their investments and their portfolios and it's daunting because I don't think I'll ever get near to what they're at. Don't compare your beginning to someone's middle or end. You don't know their journey. You don't know what they've been through to get to that. And you don't know where you're going to end up long term. As an example, when I first started in my 20s, I was up to my eyes in debt and I was tucking away maybe 20, 30, 40 pound a month into investments. And then a lot of the time I was taking it back out because I couldn't afford to eat. I look at myself now and I never would have thought that I would be here. And at that time, I was probably comparing myself to people thinking, God, I've done so badly here. I'm so far behind. It serves no one well. And it doesn't do justice to the journey that individual's been on. The person who sat there with a massive portfolio has either worked really hard to get it or has some advantages in their life that means they can just slap a load of money in the market. I think, to look at their portfolio and assume that it was easy for them or that they didn't struggle at one point, that might not be the case. So yeah, just try and put the comparison to one side because you could get there, you never know. In terms of advice though, I don't give financial advice, of course, because I'm not your financial advisor. But what I would say is the process is the same really if you've got £1 a month or £10,000 a month to invest. In my opinion, I've been doing the same kind of thing the whole time. I just buy a global index fund inside of a tax efficient account and I rinse repeat that. I make sure that I have emergency savings that I can lean on so that I don't end up spending that money. And I make sure that those emergency savings are in an easy access kind of cash equivalent account. And I look to outrun inflation on that so that I don't lose the purchasing power of that money over time. Rinse repeat that. Take advantage of your pensions, take advantage of stocks and shares, ISAs and things like this. And one of the benefits of being on a lower income is that your pot doesn't need to be as big to provide the income that you need to live. Whereas someone who spends £1 million a year is going to need a monumentally sized, they only need 25 million quid or whatever in retirement savings to support that kind of spending habit. Got a bit rambly there, I hope that helps. Yasmin. Is it normal to find it hard to spend money on things like holidays when you realise how much you need to save for your future? Yes, and it never goes away, Yasmin. I'm still the same. I end up finding, I'm planning a holiday and it's cost like a few grand, whatever. And I'm like, God, if I put that into a compound interest calculator and, run the numbers for 30 years, this holiday's costing me 100 grand. You never live your life like that. What I would say is that, life is for living. You got to make those allocations towards your future self. And you've also got to make the allocations towards yourself today so that when you look back, you go, I had a great time. It's about that balance. And what I would also say is every holiday I've ever been on forms some of the greatest memories of my life. When I talk to my mates or my son or my family, it's the holidays we went on together that we often talk about. I don't know how much any of those holidays cost me. I can't really remember. The only one I can really remember is the last holiday I went on with my son, and I don't regret the cost. I remember thinking, God, this is a bit expensive. I don't regret the cost now. So, yeah, go on your holiday. Sam, do you think considering a course certificate such as the International Certificate in Wealth and Investment Management is a good idea to help solidify some key financial learnings, or only if you're wanting to go into it as a job? I like this idea, of doing a qualification so that you can understand the concepts better. And if you're really into this, go for it. But I'll give you some advice that was given to me. I wanted to become a financial advisor so that I could sit here and go, I am a financial advisor, give me a bit more kind of weight and credibility, because I believe it does do that. And there are some excellent financial advisors on this platform talking about, personal finance. I spoke to my friend George Agan, who is a financial advisor who has a YouTube channel. And he basically said to me, become a qualified financial advisor because that allows you to sell investment products. It allows you to advise on products. But I don't want to do that. That's not what I want to do. And I think a lot of the qualifications lead to specific job outcomes. And unless you really want that job outcome, you might not need that qualification. Or before you do the qualification, ask, what are the job outcomes that qualification leads to? Because you might find that it doesn't actually teach you about what you want it to, and it takes you in another route. The wealth management stuff, you might end up learning about like trusts and things and inheritance tax and stuff that really doesn't apply to you or is of that much interest. Go for it if you find it fascinating and you're the kind of person who likes to study. I started doing some of the RO modules, which are the qualifications that lead to you becoming a financial advisor. I think it's the Chartered Institute of Insurers qualification. Don't quote me. Anyway, RO1, my God, is that boring. It's like a book like this. I used to go sit in the John Rylands Library in Manchester, which is a beautiful building, trying to read about RO1, and any advisor out there, anyone who's ever looked at it will know that RO1 is a beast and is pretty dull. So, if you're going to give up your time for it, make sure that you get out of it what you want, and maybe look at what the job result is for that, qualification before you jump into it, because a lot of them cost a lot of money as well. Maybe you can learn it without paying. Anyway, that's it. I think we're probably there near 3 hours, which is a director's cut extended edition of a Lord of the Rings that you could have watched. Instead, you watched me get all the paper in the basket. There's paper absolutely everywhere, so I don't know. I know my editor Colin will keep a tally of it. I hope he has anyway. Whatever's down there, we'll double it and we'll send that to the food bank. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that helps. I hope you like these question videos, and yeah, we'll see you in the next one.